My British Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, The Jew in the Bank. At present, the Hanseatic League is reluctant to part with England. A big market going against England for an abandoned route is not, after all, a good idea. What's more, the annual meeting of the Hanseatic League starts in January. If you want to deal with England, it will take a long time now. Edward sneered a few times, not caring about the Hanseatic League at all. The loose Hanseatic League, as long as it buys a few cities, it can wipe out that sanction proposal. So Edward didn't care about the so-called Hanseatic League at all, let alone the sanctions. Historically, even though Elizabeth I expelled the Hanseatic merchants from England, they did not dare to make any moves. Laura, go to the Privy Council to send a message to hold an imperial meeting in the afternoon. Edward thought about it. Although he currently looked down on the Hanseatic League, if it harassed, it would still be quite troublesome for England. The blame caused by the king should be borne by the government. The government is here to take the blame for the king. Otherwise, the government can be disbanded. So the next imperial meeting will specifically study how to deal with the counterattack of the Hanseatic League. Although what he said was very easy, but at present, the Hanseatic League is indeed quite threatening. Edward felt a little guilty in his heart, but in a blink of an eye, he recovered. As a king, he had to adapt, and the government had to adapt, and he got used to taking the blame. In the afternoon, the entire central government was busy preparing several plans as countermeasures. The meeting went quickly. Edward said something directly, and then Laura made a specific statement, and he left the meeting room. Of course, he is also busy in the afternoon. He needs to meet with the president of the Royal Bank. Adler Todd is the central bank of the royal family. The Royal Bank of England spread throughout the British Isles under the leadership of Adler Todd. Your Majesty, in the past 5 years, the Bank of England has established branches in all counties of the country. The counties of Scotland, Wales, and the island of Ireland all have our branches. The total number has reached 86, with 1,340 employees. The annual profit has reached £300,000. Adler Todd had two beards on his lips, dark green eyes, and a very serious expression on his face. He lowered his head slightly and bent over, showing a respectful expression. Moreover, we have opened branches in France, Spain, Portugal, Naples, Egypt and other places, with a total deposit of £12 million and 300,000 customers. If England can maintain its current development momentum, the total number of customers will reach 1 million within 3 years. When he said 1 million, Todd's face was full of pride. Such a huge number of customers almost made the Bank of England the #1 position, the #1 in Europe in just a few years. I don't know how many centuries the bank has gone through, and how many people's jaws have been shocked. Of course, the biggest credit for everything now lies in the support of the royal family, not to mention anything else. The wages of the entire guards and militia, as well as the wages of officials in England, are all paid by the Bank of England. The rough sum of these people is no less than 100,000. Coupled with sufficient financial support, the development of the entire Bank of England is called smooth sailing. 300,000 customers, covering most of Europe. This number is only due to insufficient training of bank personnel and insufficient staff to work. As a result, no one works even if a branch is opened. In addition, in this era, there are still too few people who believe in banks. They are worried that after putting money in the bank, it will never return. Even if it is opened by the royal family, it will not have a strong reputation. Of course, Edward knew that the amount of 1 million was just a big picture. The entire population of Europe is only about 20 million, and 1 in 20 people uses the Bank of England. It is impossible to think about it. However, as an imagination, it is still good. I know, Todd, you did a good job. For such a hero, it's okay to praise him. But Edward's eyes were fixed, and he looked at Adler Todd, who was cautious, with a half smile. This somewhat stubborn Jew, with a hint of a smile in his eyes. I heard that a lot of Jews have come to the Bank of England recently. Are they your relatives? Hearing His Majesty's question, Adler's body trembled slightly, then raised his head cautiously, looked into His Majesty's eyes, and said softly, These are indeed my relatives. After getting your Majesty's attention, those relatives from the Netherlands came to me and took refuge in me. One is because the Bank of England is short of people, and the other is that they are hired because they are more familiar with the banking industry. Speaking of this, his head drooped more and more, and his waist was also in a 90-degree shape. Although he couldn't see his face, Edward could predict that it must be white and blue for the sake of my service to you for many years. Please forgive my self-assertion. For this matter, Edward naturally didn't take it to heart. It was only human nature to take care of his relatives and friends. It was a trivial matter, and it was indeed beneficial to the development of the Bank of England. Of course, it's a trivial matter for your relatives and friends to work in the bank, but I don't feel very relieved about their beliefs. Edward's attitude was still relaxed, and his tone was as calm as ever, but what he said made Adler's heart tremble. When Jews live in Europe, the biggest conflict lies in their religious beliefs, which are not tolerated by Catholicism and all Protestants. Based on faith, the Jews survived. Based on faith, the Jews were excluded from Europe. In this way, no matter which country a Jew is in, what he or she recognizes from the bottom of his heart is his Jewish identity. Therefore, they can launch a financial crisis without any regard for national interests, exploit the property of civilians, and cause chaos in the country in later generations. Even though there are a large number of Jews living in the United States, they still believe in their Jewish identity in their hearts, and use their huge wealth to influence the United States and help Israel. For them, America is their place of residence, but Israel is their true home. Therefore, 1 or 2 Jews, Edward can still tolerate, but a large number of Jews entering England, especially financial institutions, broke through his bottom line at some point in the future war. If a choice is made between the interests of the Jews and the interests of England, those Jews will definitely choose to abandon England without hesitation. For this kind of nation, they cannot be allowed to control the lifeline of a country. Chapter 377 New Currency. Jews can only take advantage, can't believe too much, and can't entrust things. Of course, as long as you change your beliefs and work hard to integrate into England, you can still believe in a little bit, such as Adler taught in front of you. Like you, all Jews must convert to the state religion if they wish to continue living in England. Or, speaking of this, Edward obviously felt that Adler's body was shaking more and more. Otherwise, let them go. Go to a place that doesn't care about their beliefs. Yes, Your Majesty, I will explain it to them in detail, please rest assured. Only then did Adler let go of his heart hanging in midair, and promised, by the way, if you convert, your wife and children must convert. Otherwise, you can go back wherever you came from. The leisurely voice of His Majesty the King was heard next to his ear, which made Adler's heart tighten. It reminded him of the fact that his wife and children were also forced to convert. Yes, Your Majesty. Adler agreed in a deep voice. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Edward said casually. Your Majesty, the governor of the central bank, Sir John George, has arrived. A young secretary in the secretarial group said in a crisp voice, wearing a decent skirt. Let him in. Immediately afterwards, a gentle and elegant middle-aged man walked in. He was wearing decent and elegant clothes, with a sexy and thick beard on his chin and lips. Glasses. His hair is black, his eyes are light blue, and he looks like a housekeeper, and he looks very reassuring. This is Sir John George, the governor of the central bank. Edward introduced to Adler, and then introduced Adler again. This is Adler Todd, the president of the Royal Bank of England. Hello, Sir John, nice to meet you. Adler held out his hand to him with a smile on his face. Hello, Mr. Todd. I hope we can have a happy cooperation in the future, Sir George. Originally the British call Sir is a title, but there are too many Johns. Let's change it, responded without humility. With a smile on his face, John George was the candidate recommended by the government, and he was also a well-known banker in London, known for his prudence regarding this. The young king thought for a moment before agreeing. After all, the central bank is still dominated by the government, and it is an institution that regulates banks and issues currency. It is more appropriate to focus on a stable person. The king can't stretch his hands too far. The independent operation of the central government still needs to be maintained, otherwise it will not be easy to take the blame. After seeing the two shaking hands with each other, Edward sat up, and now it was time to talk about business. And the two big men in the banking industry straightened their backs, stared at His Majesty the King, and waited for his speech. Since the former king issued the new pound, although the finances have been improved very well, the consequences have been somewhat serious. Edward looked at the two of them, and then said lightly. Hearing this, Sir George and Adler couldn't stop talking in their hearts. It's a little serious. I'm afraid you're too embarrassed to say it. After Henry VIII came to the throne, he used troops against France and Scotland year after year, which not only used up the £1 million left by Henry VIII, but also consumed a lot of dividends from the Reformation. So Henry VIII turned his brains to currency in 1544. Henry VIII had the silver content of silver coins and imported a large amount of precious metals from the Americas. increasing the money supply of England as a whole. This is also commonly known as inflation. The money in people's hands is becoming less and less valuable, and those local gentry went bankrupt only because of their loans, but those farmers and civilians had a more difficult life, and the entire economy of England was in a mess. Inflation is intensifying, and those nobles and big landlords, worried that their assets will shrink, so wantonly enclose land to ensure that their wealth will not be easily lost. In fact, Edward, like ordinary people, attributed the enclosure movement to the greed of nobles and landlords, as well as the development of commerce, which made nobles and big landlords thirsty for land for reproduction. However, a while ago, the Minister of Agriculture and Commerce came to report that the local land enclosure movement was still going on. There were more and more violations of government orders, and farmers continued to go bankrupt and leave their homes. In addition, the Chancellor of the Exchequer reported to him that fiscal revenue in the first half of this year was flat compared to the same period last year, with negligible growth. Logically speaking, with a continuous development of business in the past few years, the tax should be more and more. How can it be flat? Only then did Edward notice that there was a problem with the currency. Currency was the cause of the growing enclosure of England and of the slow growth of revenue. As long as the currency factor is still there, the enclosure movement will never stop, and bankrupt farmers will have a high chance of rioting and uprising, endangering his rule. Therefore, the purpose of calling these two people today is to reissue the currency, that is to say, to issue a new type of silver coin to eliminate the silver coins with very little silver content currently in use on the market. It stands to reason that issuing currency should be a matter for the central bank and has nothing to do with the Royal Bank of England. However, who said that the central bank has a short preparation time and cannot spread its tentacles throughout England, Scotland, Wales, and the island of Ireland at this time? The Royal Bank of England, the largest bank in the British Isles, comes in handy, relying on the huge branch system. Most of the silver coins circulating in the market can be recycled, so that new coins can be circulated. The central bank is ready to issue a new type of currency to replace the currency currently circulating in England. Edward commanded in a deep voice, including pounds, shillings, and pence. Sir George was a little surprised when he heard this. He didn't understand how the young King's Majesty started to reform the currency on a whim. Then, on what model? Sir George went on restore the shillings and pence to pre-1544 standards, and increase the gold content of the pound by 2.5%, Edward said without hesitation. In fact, in the past few decades, the advent of the age of great voyages has caused many countries to face the troubles of inflation. Not only the value of silver coins, but also the value of gold coins has continued to decline. The timely increase of gold content is conducive to the circulation of the British pound throughout Europe. In this way, the pressure of domestic inflation in England will be reduced a lot. As for you, Todd, the Bank of England needs to help the central bank to exchange and recycle currency. Yes, Your Majesty, if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378. Coming out of the palace, Chandler and Sir George walked side by side, chatting about the currency reform. Of course, although the central bank is the leader of all banks, at present, the Royal Bank of England is the largest commercial bank in England, and the central bank has to borrow the channels of the Bank of England to recycle and issue new currencies. You should put away your arrogance. After the two left the palace talking and laughing, they went home in their carriages. As soon as he got into the carriage, the smile on Adler's face immediately subsided, as if he was fighting with his dead mother. The groom seemed to see that the master was in a bad mood, so he stopped talking and drove the carriage back home silently. Go and rest. Adler walked into the house with a gloomy face after giving instructions to his groom. After watching his master's footsteps, the groom drove the carriage to the back door, opened the small door, and entered the backyard. Master, you're back. I've worked hard for you today. As soon as he entered the gate of the yard, a 13 or 14-year-old boy ran over quickly, put a bowl of water in front of him, took the reins of the horse, and turned the horse. The child and the carriage were unloaded. He took the horse to the stable, and brought in some bundles of hay, which the horse ate happily, and the groom thumped his arm, sat down on the chair, drank water, and watched the boy busy there. Don't rein the horse too tightly. Easy, light. Don't feed too much, there will be more in the middle of the night. Looking at the figure of his apprentice Molyneux, although the groom looked scolded on his face, he was very satisfied in his heart. Although this apprentice's movements are not standard, but he usually works quickly, knows how to love and respect others, and has a good character. Alan, after you're done, go make a cup of tea for your husband and add more sugar. He seems to be in a bad mood." Looking at Alan's busy figure, the groom couldn't help reminding at present, in the entire Todd family, the hero Adler is the most in need of funning, especially for a young man like Alan who doesn't want to be mediocre, but wants to please. So, with a thought in his heart, he made a point. "Yes, master, I understand." Alan carried the hay into the manger, turned his head, and said to the wrinkled groom, "You have to know that Sir is the governor of the Bank of England. You are still young. You have only been in our house for more than 2 months. You just need to perform well." The groom looked at Alan's immature face, watched his gradually walking away, and said earnestly, "Understood, master." Alan turned his head and persuaded him, "You should also rest. After a busy day, it's not that you don't know that your legs are not good." Alan silently remembered his words in his heart, and then walked slowly to the front hall. To be precise, he was Todd's servant in England, except for those nobles, other emerging families. All servants are hired, no longer belong to hereditary. For those who are interested in carrying forward the family, the hired servants will basically choose young people to cultivate loyalty from an early age. This was the case for Alan, who was hired by Todd's family, with food and housing included every month, and a salary of 1 shilling. The treatment was really good, but he was not willing to be a little servant, so he learned to drive a car, learned to make tea, and learn everything that can be learned, so that he can become a master. He came to the living room with light steps, first took out the boiling hot water from the kitchen, then took out the precious tea leaves, added salt, sugar, cinnamon and other spices, until the color of the whole teapot was unrecognizable. At that moment, he took out the teapot and walked to the living room. At this time, there were 7 or 8 people gathered in the reception hall, including the mistress of the Todd family, all of whom were blushing. As if they were arguing, Alan's arrival finally made them pause for a while. Alan took advantage of this time to fill up the teacups next to everyone one by one, and then stood aside sensibly, serving quietly. "Adler, tell me, what kind of madness has this king gone to want us to convert to the Anglican sect?" A young man sitting on the lower left of Adler, in his 20s, with very light eyebrows and thin lips, complained fiercely to his brother-in-law. "Yes, Adler, faith cannot be abandoned no matter what. It is more important than life, and it is a necessary condition for God to save us in the future." On his lower right, a bearded man in his 40s was very dissatisfied with Adler's conversion and accused him. "Although there are elements of persecution, you should not submit. Submitting to those hypocrites is the greatest shame for us, the most elite nation." Speaking of this, the man became more and more excited. He pointed to Adler's nose, his tone became more and more serious, and he even had the urge to hide him. "Uncle, it's not Adler's fault. If you want to blame it, blame me." Adler's wife looked at the middle-aged man with red and swollen eyes, and said softly, "It's all my fault for dragging him down with the 2 children, otherwise, he would never have succumbed to that little king." Seeing that the topic was getting off track, Adler's younger brother Beeper was a little anxious, and quickly interrupted, "Stop discussing Adler's conversion, and think about how to respond to the little king's request. Convert or return to the Netherlands. This is our current choice. No, we must not change our faith. We are not Adler. We would rather go to the guillotine than change our beliefs." Absolutely cannot learn from Adler. 7 or 8 people were discussing more and more loudly, and their own names were mentioned in the words from time to time, which made Adler extremely uncomfortable and distressed. "Okay, it's useless to discuss any more." Adler stood up directly, stood in front of these relatives, his eyes widened, looked at these relatives in front of him, and he yelled loudly, "Next, this multiple choice question is on you. Don't involve me. Think carefully today, and give me an answer tomorrow. Now, you can go." In the last sentence, Adler really yelled out with his throat, which made these relatives frightened for a moment. They didn't expect that the man who had been timid all this time suddenly showed his power, which caught them by surprise just when they were about to retort. Adler gave them a hard look and knocked their minds apart. Seeing these relatives walking away slowly, Adler got up and sat down, his chest rising and falling. He finally understood that the shame of his conversion a few years ago made them more and more presumptuous, and each of them pushed their noses in the face. Forgot, without him, they would all be pursued in the Netherlands one by one. At this time, Alan, who was standing aside, lowered his head and heard this scene. When it was time to feed the horses at night, he quietly came to the stable and threw a piece of paper over the wall. Chapter 379, Raising a Food Bear. Hampton Palace is located on the banks of the Thames River, half surrounded by the entire Thames River, and the palace is surrounded by grass, a piece of emerald green, which makes people feel relaxed and happy. Not far from the grassland is the calm Thames River, a long light green river flowing gently, and boats, large and small, sail on this mother river, relying on her to live. Of course, the weather is beautiful and today is a fine day, although in autumn, the light of the sun is a bit dim, but the sky is high and the clouds are light, which makes people feel refreshed. In this way, Edward came out with the three little guys who had been full for 100 days, and let's appreciate the beauty of nature together. Of course, accompanied by sisters Lucy Luna, Secretary Emma with big breasts, Elizabeth and Mary. Speaking of Mary, 3 of the original 4 little Marys who accompanied Queen Mary have gone back, and only Mary Hamilton with light red hair remained. Of course, their return does not refer to Scotland, but to London. Since Edward once again conquered Scotland, he has required nobles to stay in London for 6 months every year, and then must attend a certain number of House of Lords meetings. Such torturous regulations made the Scottish nobles miserable. One is their own hometown, a king's rule, which makes the nobles have to run twice. In London and Scotland it's okay for a year or two, and it's like this all the year round. How can those pampered nobles bear it? Finally, most of the Scottish nobles decided to settle in London, leaving butlers to manage the family property for the nobles. They do not expect their family property to be usurped, they are blue-blooded nobles instead. He was reluctant to part with his hometown and went to that strange area. After all, London is the home of the English, and they rely on their local power. All among the 4 major families, the Beaton family, the Campbell family, and the Lennox family, as the leaders, were the first group of Scottish nobles to move here, which is of great significance as for the Hamilton family, the former regent, the Earl of Allen, was old and Ellen could not travel far. They would move here after a period of time when they were better. Edward didn't care about this. Anyway, it was all meat to the mouth, and he couldn't escape no matter what. The grass was covered with a thick layer of blankets, all of which were made of high-quality fine wool. It was soft and comfortable to sit on. The blanket was extremely old, covering about 10 square meters, and all the people sat cross-legged on it. Today, Princess Elizabeth is wearing a light green long dress, still embellished with her favorite lace trim, and with light makeup on her face. She looks white, tender and particularly radiant. Queen Mary, on the other hand, was wearing a long white dress. Her hair, like Elizabeth's, was scattered over her shoulders. Her long red hair looked like a fire from a distance. There was no makeup on her face, and she was sitting in the middle of the blankets, with her head bowed, a smile on her face, and she was staring straight ahead. And in front of them, 3 small people, wearing small clothes, lying on the blanket, drooling, basking in the sun. Lucy and the others watched them cautiously, formed a small circle, and teased them from time to time, and then the group of women would laugh from ear to ear, leaning forward and backward. Then they scrambled to hug and kiss, as if they got a fun toy. Very excited. Even Edward, who had been fishing there all the time, was in a messed up state of mind that was originally calm. Seeing this, Edward couldn't help but looked up, looked at them angrily, dropped a fishing rod in his hand on the ground, stopped fishing, and stared at them fiercely. After a few seconds, when he realized that he was being ignored like a majestic king, the anger in his heart dissipated, and he could only endure it silently. After that, Edward knocked carefully, and found that the eldest daughter, Alice in red, was lying in his sister's arms, but her small round eyes were cast on him from her eyes. Edward saw helplessness in this regard. Edward shrugged helplessly, said sorry to his daughter softly, then picked up the fishing rod on the ground, and prepared to do it all over again. This time, Her Royal Highness, who was holding Alice, discovered her secret, turned her head, and waited to find that Alice saw Edward. She was about to smile at first, then suddenly turned angry, gave Edward a hard look, and then forcibly turned Alice's head around, turning her back to him in this way. Edward really couldn't figure it out. Regarding his sister's sudden tantrum, he could only attribute it to one of the abnormal behaviors of the woman. Afterwards, Edward put his troubles behind him and continued to complete his fishing career. After a while, Edward felt that the fishing rod was slightly tilted downwards, and the prey came up, and he smiled inwardly. Then, he swung upward vigorously, unable to shake the fishing rod from side to side, and then throw it up again. A fish about half a foot, 10 centimeters, landed on the grass, alive and kicking, extremely active. Edward looked at the unknown big fish with a smile on his face, and this is, before he was proud for a long time. A big black claw stretched out, and before Edward could react, he sent the fish into his mouth neatly and ate it wantonly. Seeing this, Edward couldn't bear it any more, and kicked the monster's fat butt, but the monster didn't care, still showing its big mouth drooling, and looked at Edward stupidly. Without blinking. "Oh Bashong, you are so tired of living, Even dare to eat the king's fish. Today I will kill you and eat the bear's paw." Seeing the stupid bear half squatting in front of him, who were taller than him, Edward couldn't help but curse fiercely. The kick just now, the thick and big butt of the stupid bear was fine, but it hurt a little when he kicked his foot, cursing. The idiot finally finished eating the fish in his mouth, and then his eyes became even hotter. He landed on all fours, like a dog, showing his long tongue, dripping from his mouth, looking at the young king with a look of no regrets. "Fish, I'm not leaving the look." Seeing this, the king, who had raised it for several years, didn't know what it was thinking, and said, "Don't even think about it, there's no fish left, you foodie. I don't know what's the use of raising you. If I knew it, I might as well raise a dog." The stupid bear's big round eyes stared at His Majesty the King, stuck out its tongue, and listened carefully to His Majesty's scolding. It blinked from time to time, showing that it was listening, and it was very quiet when it got here. It seemed like Edward taught it a lesson. "Your Majesty, just spare Oba Bear just once. It's still young, not yet an adult." Mary Hamilton, who was following behind, had long light red hair, light green eyes, a straight nose, and thin lips, as if she was wearing light red lipstick. She stood beside Clumsy Bear, pretty and lively, talking about love. Chapter 380, England and number 039, S. Imperial Examinations. In this way, Edward glanced at the pretty Mary Hamilton, then at the black and dull bear in front of him, sighed, and then continued his fishing career. When he sat down and was about to start, the stupid bear arched his clothes, as if he would not give up. "Mary, get it away." Edward turned around in desperation, and said to Mary beside him, "Okay, Your Majesty." Mary agreed crisply, then grabbed the bear's ears with her two jade-like arms, and pulled them back vigorously. Stupid bear endured the pain, looked directly at Edward, full of pleading expression, and backed away in small steps, looking extremely pitiful. The reason why it allows the red-haired Mary to pull the ears mainly because the stupid bear has been fed by several Marys since it was adopted by Edward, so it is very familiar. Edward didn't appreciate it at all, and started his own fishing business on his own. "Your Majesty, this is new information." At this moment, a young man of 17 or 18 came over from the guards and whispered into the young king. "0. Really?" Edward took the note in his hand, looked at it carefully, and muttered softly. Note recorded in detail the situation after Adler Todd returned home yesterday. Regarding this, Edward smiled and said casually, "Well, it seems that my banker's attitude is pretty good." He turned his head, looked at the young face of Jack, the leader of the palace intelligence department, and couldn't help sighing in his heart. It's good to be young. In the future, the supervision over him must continue. Don't relax. The Jews are still unreliable. You have to remember. "Yes, Your Majesty." There was a hint of surprise on Jack's stern face, and he immediately agreed. "By the way, recently, how many officials in England have gone to Ireland?" Looking at Jack's face, Edward immediately thought of something and asked. "Your Majesty, in the past half a month, more than 100 people have been investigated for corruption, and there are more than 300 officials and their families who went to Ireland. We have not received detailed information this month." Jack kept his face cold as usual, lowered his head, and said respectfully, "Really? This surprised me, and I was a little worried. Did the people admitted last year have vacant official positions?" Edward smiled softly when he heard these numbers, not taking it seriously. "Let's go. Let's talk while walking." Edward put down the fishing rod directly and walked along the river. Seeing this, Jack took a look and followed silently. "What about Ireland? What about the expansion of immigration strongholds?" Edward looked at the rippling river surface and the swans playing wantonly, and asked casually. "Currently speaking, in the Ulster province, Mr. Lemire Watson is expanding the fastest, and Sir John Perrott is not far behind. It is not far away to achieve the set goal." Of course, Jack knew that His Majesty the King was only interested in the first place, and the others were not. Of course, Sir John Perrott was also a part of His Majesty's interest. After all, he was the illegitimate son of Henry VIII, and His Majesty the King valued him a lot. "It's not Sir John. That Lemire is very good." Edward was a little surprised. He didn't expect that the first place was not the most valued John Perrott, but also an unknown newcomer. What did he do in the first place? Although he had selected the 18 people himself, he would not remember them all. It's not just a matter of how many noble people forget things. He was originally a small official in Behu district, and then he went to Cambridgeshire in East England, and after he was promoted, he was sent to Ireland by you. When he was informed that His Majesty the King had summoned him and was by his side, Jack knew that he had a chance to perform as a close minister. Only gaining the trust of the king is the main reason for him to maintain his current status. If His Majesty the King is dissatisfied with him, there is a risk of being replaced. He had memorized all the content of the report by heart, and he blurted it out. That's okay. Sure enough, there are still many talents among the common people. Sighing, Edward glanced at Jack. Where's Scotland? In the following time, Edward talked with Jack for a long time, finally understanding what had happened in recent months. On August 8th, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the whole of London was in pitch black. The sound of birds was hard to hear, and the crescent moon in the sky seemed dim at this time. London, instead of the peace and tranquility of the past, became noisy, with pedestrians coming and going on the road, talking a lot, sellers of hot bread, umbrellas, pens, and so on. They yelled as they walked, dispelling the coldness of the night. A lot. The houses on the side of the road were also lit with oil lamps one by one, illuminating the bustling street brightly, and the faces of pedestrians could be discerned vaguely. The Grand Hotel London, Lincolnshire exclusive floor. Eaton put on his clothes and put his pen and dry food into the package. I'll look to the weather again, then put the umbrella in, and then took a few coats and put them in. The weather in London is unpredictable and cannot be viewed with common sense. What's more, the 5 exams took 2 consecutive days, and they were locked in a small room, eating and drinking for 2 days, and couldn't go out. The necessary preparations are still necessary. Picking up his bag, he walked out the door. At this time, one after another, like him, people walked out of the room and started to take the exam. Seeing these familiar faces, Eaton nodded, and ignored them. Ignoring the pale faces, Eaton didn't care at all about how they behaved. He walked downstairs expressionlessly and got into his exclusive carriage. This carriage will escort them to the newly established test center, which is about 3 miles away. At 4:30, everyone got into the carriage and the carriage started. Tension is the expression of everyone, and the next time is a critical moment to determine their future. There is a difference between common people and officials. The carriage drove slowly, and when they arrived at the examination site, the sky was also slightly pale, and it started to drizzle a little. After docking, Eaton got out of the carriage and looked around on the entire flat ground. The carriages stopped one after another. The signs on the carriages were of different colors. Hundreds of people got down one by one. In the blink of an eye, the flat ground was already full of people. In front of the flat ground, a huge courtyard was located here. Hundreds of selected policemen and guards stood guard in front of the gate, watching them, pointing and pointing. Eaton and others opened an umbrella, and a dozen people formed a group, waiting for the gate to open. At 8 o'clock, the whole exam officially began, a 2-day arduous process. Chapter 381. Misunderstanding. Norfolk is a county located in the northeast of England, and the easternmost county by the sea. The terrain here is low-lying, densely covered with rivers and lakes, and the land is sparsely populated. It has many royal territories, and its economy is dominated by agriculture. It can be said that Norfolk is sparsely populated, which has a lot to do with the terrain here. The swamp village is the most obvious feature of this swamp village. As the name suggests, there is a big swamp next to the village, and the whole village is located next to the swamp. The entire village has a population of more than 100 people and more than 300 acres of arable land. Life is miserable. There are no knights or knights here, only a squire named Martin. At the same time, he also served as the village head. The whole village lives a life of working at sunrise and resting at sunset, peaceful and harmonious. If there is anything that bothers them the most, it is the marriage of men and women in the village. Currently, in the entire village, there are 36 adult males and only 11 adult females. It's all like this. There are also several females who have married to other villages and are unwilling to stay in the village. Marsh village is too poor. There are more than 100 people and only 300 mu of land. They can only barely fill their stomachs. It is very difficult to eat enough. They are the only village in the entire swamp village within 50 miles. If you want to go to the nearest town, you have to walk 100 miles or 2 or 3 days. Women don't want to marry, and young men can only be single. For everyone in the village, the big swamp next to the village is full of resentment. Their biggest dream is to turn the great fen into a great level, and the great swamp into a great flat land. On this day, the largest landowner and squire, Martin, who owns more than 100 acres of land, was sitting at the gate of his house, looking at the endless swamp in front of him, and he couldn't help sighing. As a squire, especially a squire in a swamp village, his greatest wish at the moment is to level the swamp in front of him and turn it into arable land. And then his family will prosper and become a famous big squire in the county. Become a gentleman, participate in politics, and have a great reputation in the whole county. However, it has been 30 years since his father's generation, and this wish has never been fulfilled, and it is impossible to achieve it. Therefore, living in this remote place, and unable to leave his homeland, he could only be in a daze of boredom, praying to God to grant his wish. Slightly closing his eyes, enjoying the rare sunlight, he felt warm and comfortable all over his body at this time. A man in short clothes and bare feet, with messy hair, ran over swiftly, and stopped immediately when he saw Martin. Master Martin, Master Martin. He looked at Martin in front of him, and couldn't help calling out hastily, hearing someone calling himself. Martin immediately opened his eyes, took a look, and then said leisurely, "Old Lal, why don't you go to your farm work? Why are you shouting here? I don't know if my master is here. Are you basking in the sun?" Seeing that it was his tenant Lal, Martin got a little angry and blamed him. "Master, there is a group of people ahead, a large group of people." Old Lal made big gestures with both hands, and said hastily to Martin, "What? There are people, a large group of people?" Martin couldn't believe it. His place is so remote, how could there be people here? This is against common sense. There must be something. 80% is not a good thing. I have to be careful. Martin thought silently in his heart. Go and call everyone in the village to come with me to see what's going on. The first choice in Martin's mind was to run away immediately, but in a blink of an eye, he thought that his property and family were all in the village, and he couldn't escape at this time. It is better to face it. Anyway, there are more than 100 people in the village, and there are few who have joined the militia and fought against His Majesty the King. What are you afraid of? Yes, sir. Old Lal agreed, and then ran to the village with muddy bare feet, yelling. In less than 10 minutes, the whole village obeyed the order of Master Martin and dispatched together. Men, women, old and children rushed over aggressively with various farm tools. Even the little kid who was just able to walk was not far behind, dragging his nose, revealing a toothpick-like little table, flicking the ground, staggering with short legs, followed the big team, and walked over. Seeing this, Master Martin's heart immediately puffed up, took small steps, and led the whole team forward for 100 feet, then stopped and waited quietly in front of the swamp village. At a distance of about half a mile, 800 meters, a group of 200 or 300 people, riding horses and pulling carts, walked over talking and laughing. This distance is already enough for the villagers in front. Mr. Coleman, is the swamp village ahead? At the front of the large group, a young man on a horse asked softly to a middle-aged man who was also on a horse. This man was in his 20s, wearing high-grade linen clothes, with a slender body and a short beard on his lips, giving him a shrewd and capable image. My lord, the swamp village is ahead. We can go there to rest. The middle-aged man lowered his head slightly, and said respectfully to the young man, if that's the case, that's good. The young man finally showed a relaxed expression on his face. God knows, he rushed from London to the county seat of Norfolk, and then rushed here again, non-stop. He was really tired. The middle-aged man on the side also breathed a sigh of relief. He has always lived in the county mansion with dignity, and this time he followed this young adult named Heber to this remote ghost place, which really exhausted him, but no one told him that this was his mission, and it was also his responsibility, so he had to obey it. More than 300 people, walking with their cars, are getting closer and closer to the villagers. Seeing the menacing over 100 people in front of him, Heber became a little confused for a moment. Seeing this, Coleman straightened his stomach, rode his horse, and walked out of the team. Hey, are you from Swamp Village? Coleman looked down at Martin's group and asked. Yes, may I ask who you are? Martin looked at the well-dressed man riding a horse in front of him, and then at the large team of hundreds of people behind him, hesitated for a moment, then raised his head timidly, and answered softly, Yes, may I ask who you are? I'm from the construction hall of Norwich. He raised his neck and said proudly. Then, he remembered something, pointed to Heber behind him and introduced, This is an adult from London. He has come here under the order of His Majesty the King. Please treat him well. When Coleman introduced Heber behind him, he bent slightly and introduced loudly, and Martin, who was surprised when he heard Norwich, became confused when he heard London again, and his heart was about to explode. Heber, who was introduced, straightened his back and raised his chin even higher. Chapter 382. Filling up the swamp. Oh my God, really, it's really my lord's blessing to be able to receive the arrival of adults. On behalf of all the villagers in Marsh Village, I welcome the arrival of adults. After a while, Master Martin came to his senses, closed his mouth wide open, bowed his waist and saluted, and said respectfully. At this time, there was an inexplicable worry in his heart, or fear. How can a poor and remote place like the Marsh Village attract the attention of London and the county government? Even if there was something, it would be a misfortune rather than a blessing for the people in the swamp village. With complicated emotions in his heart, Master Martin raised his head and looked at the two adults on the horse. It's really troublesome for you. Higburi, who was sitting on the horse, nodded. We also have important responsibilities. I hope you can cooperate in the next time. By the way, my name is Martin, and I am the head of this village. Martin walked over and said softly, okay, Mr. Martin, I hope that Swamp Village can give us some help in the next time. Higburi got off his horse, with a smile on his face, and he greeted softly, very politely. At this moment, Martin felt a lot more at ease. Looking at the adult from London in front of him, he was young and polite, with a different and comfortable temperament. Please come with me, the village is really simple. If there is any dissatisfaction, please forgive me. Martin was in front, leading the way while turning his head, and said respectfully as Higburi walked. He looked at the shabby houses around him and smiled reluctantly. Of course, I'm ready. The thatched cottages around are crumbling, either leaking air or dilapidated. Living in it is a real pain. This is my house, you and this lord can borrow it, and the rest. Martin pointed to the neatest and cleanest house in the village and said that it was the only brick house in the village. Listening to Martin's words, Higburi certainly knew what he meant, waved his hand, and said, they're all going to live outside. Tents are brought. Higburi's heart is such a broken house. They would rather live outside in this way. More than 300 people lived in the swamp village and spent the night quietly. The next day, as soon as he woke up, Higburi called everyone together, and invited the village chief, Mr. Martin, to go forward together as a guide. Everyone followed Martin's command, and came to the Great Swamp. The specific scope of this Great Swamp is no longer available, and no one has counted it. The Great Swamp straddles Cambridgeshire and Norfolk, and is arguably the largest swamp in East England historically. After the swamp was filled, huge usable arable land was obtained. After preliminary adjustment, 380 square kilometers of arable land were obtained, about 95,000 acres. Therefore, while roads were being built across the country, the Central Engineering and Construction Department, under the personal sponsorship of His Majesty the King, set off to this land. Their goal is only one, to drain the swamp. This action is also known as the Great Flat Earth Movement. In Edward's view, as long as the swamp is filled, not only can a huge amount of land be obtained, but also a lot of wealth can be obtained, making the royal family even richer. It can improve England's food supply chain, increase arable land, ease the reduction of arable land due to enclosure, and force the entire England to reduce the price of food, thus allowing a large number of people to be born regardless of whether it is now or in the 21st century. Population is the foundation of a country's strength. Especially in this era, population still determines the foundation of a country's prosperity. After all, hot weapons have not yet been fully popularized, and when the army reaches a certain number, it is enough to crush anyone. The number of people in England plus Scotland, Wales, and Ireland can reach about 5 million, while France has already reached tens of millions. Colonization and building a large navy require a large population. Otherwise, like the Netherlands later, there were enough ships but insufficient sailors, and the road to becoming a powerful country would be blocked at once. From the original sea coachman, it has become a country playing with finance. Therefore, the next task, Edward, is to make England's population explode. More than 300 people arrived at the Great Swamp within a short while. It's really a wide swamp. Looking at the endless swamp water in front of him, countless water birds live here, and all kinds of animals depend on this place to live. Standing on the high ground, small rivers flow into the swamp in the distance, making this huge monster even more frightening. Seeing such a scene, Higburi sighed. My lord, such a huge swamp is really difficult to drain. The project is extremely huge, and it is difficult for us people to carry out it. Coleman frowned, looked around, and said softly to Higburi to become the director of the Norfolk County Engineering and Construction Department. I still know a little about engineering construction. Such a huge swamp requires a lot of time and money, I know, but there is always a way. Higburi frowned and sighed. Aren't all the people who come here are experienced people? Someone will always find a way. Go on. Get to know this frightening swamp. Higburi is the deacon of the East England office of the Ministry of Engineering and Construction, responsible for the East England region. He is a professional, and of course he knows the difficulties, but this was ordered by His Majesty the King himself, and he had to do it, and this is also a good opportunity for him to be promoted. If he completes this task, he will get the favor of His Majesty the King, and his promotion is just around the corner. My lord, please be careful. There are few people in this swamp. Poisonous spiders and crocodiles often appear, and there are many dangers. When Martin heard that the big swamp was being drained, his heart moved. When he heard that the group of people were going to visit the swamp, He immediately broke into cold sweat and quickly reminded them, "Oh, if that's the case, then everyone just watch from the sidelines. Don't go deep, be careful." Hearing this, Highbury immediately gave instructions to Coleman beside him. "Yes, my lord." Coleman quickly agreed. Highbury is one of his immediate superiors in name, and he has a great say in the evaluation of his political achievements, so he can't help but carelessly serve him. The 300 or so people who followed behind him suddenly became cautious, and started their own exploration projects in groups. The whole morning passed, and everyone came back safe and sound, and began to talk about their plans. "I think an artificial river should be built to drain the water from the swamp. We should block all the rivers upstream, so the swamp will dry up quickly. No, it should be filled with soil. There are big mountains nearby, so there should be no shortage of soil." Chapter 383, The Evil Slave Trade. Finally, after 3 days of discussion, everyone finally reached a consensus to build a large river. The course of this river is about 21 miles, about 34 kilometers, from Iris to Denver, and the distance of the Ouse River is greatly shortened. The Ouse River will join the north-flowing Trent River 14 kilometers east of Gaulle to form the Humber and empty into the North Sea. In this way, the river that fills the swamp with the largest amount of water will be diverted and flow directly to the North Sea, reducing the amount of inflow into the swamp by a lot. Moreover, they also designed to connect some small rivers in the upper reaches and build channels to irrigate various places along the coast. If such a project is realized, more arable land will be created. Of course, the biggest difficulty, money. With the support of His Majesty the King, has no problem at all, and the construction is approved. 50 years later in history, this great project is about to be built. But it is the power of the people, extremely underfunded without state support. It was finally completed in 1637 with the support of the 4th Earl of Bedford. Therefore, after the flattening project of the Great Swamp is completed, this large flat land is also called Bedford Flat. Of course, this is only the basic project. If the swamp is to be completely turned into fertile land, the second stage of the project is required. However, this project was able to continue until the 1960s under the chaotic British society and the distribution of benefits. What a disaster! Soon, the proposal was passed to London, and a few days later, a sum of up to £10,000 reached the Everglades, followed by a royal overseer. He is the supervisor of the entire flatland operation, overseeing the use of money and the progress of the project. It's not that the young king didn't believe them, it's really unpredictable. £10,000 is a figure that ordinary people can't reach in a lifetime, and it is very likely to be corrupted. Don't overestimate the integrity of bureaucrats. After the money was in place, the entire Everglades area began to be built vigorously. Since this was a private action of the royal family, most of the workers were farmers from the vicinity of the Great Swamp, who were forced to work by the king for 30 days under the command of Highbury. Thousands of people began to build the river channel, which was huge in scale. Devon, Plymouth. John Hawkins stood on the deck of his family's largest ship, followed by his younger brother William Hawkins, and several strong sailors. The ship slowly left Plymouth and sailed away from the pier. The sails were hung on the ship. Under the waving oars of the sailors, the whole ship began to turn, broke through the waves, and began to head for its own destination. Surrounding them are 3 large and small armed merchant ships, all of which belonged to his family's property. John Hawkins was born in 1532 in a family of merchants and sailors in Plymouth, Devon, southwest England. The Hawkins family was a prominent maritime power on the west coast of England at that time, and many members of the family were engaged in overseas business ventures. Hawkins' father, William Hawkins, started the maritime trade between Britain and Brazil in 1530 and became a well-known businessman at that time. He represented Plymouth in Parliament 3 times. Unfortunately, the weather was unfavorable. When he was 24 years old, his father died of illness. Hawkins, who received sailing training on the family's ship since he was a child, inherited his father's business after his father's death in 1554, inherited the family's fleet, and started a freight business. He did not engage in business with Brazil like his father, but took advantage of the improved relations between England and Spain, and began to engage in trade with Spain and the Canary Islands, transporting minerals and various necessities of life, which was very profitable. Through these activities, in less than a year, the wealth of his family has more than doubled. However, a while ago, he met a Spanish businessman, and a conflict broke out with him. Immediately, his business encountered various difficulties. After a few months, the profit was minimal. In this way, he was forced to give up this lucrative opportunity and choose a new business. At this time, He learned that the Spanish colonists in the West Indies were in urgent need of a large number of slave labor. The so-called West India refers to the fact that at the end of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th century, the Italian navigator Columbus sailed westward to the Atlantic Ocean 4 times in order to find a route from Europe to the east, and discovered some islands on the northeast coast of South and North America and the Caribbean Sea. Think India later, when the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci arrived on the east coast of South America. He proved that this was a new continent unknown to Europeans. Later European colonists called the islands between the South and North American continents West Indies. That's where Cuba is. After receiving this powerful news, Hawkins immediately decided to abandon his business in Spain and turn to the slave trade to supply slaves to the West Indies. John, are we just giving up? This is a very profitable business. William Hawkins, who was blowing the sea breeze, turned his head, looked at his elder brother with the vicissitudes of life, and asked softly, "Of course, my brother." John Hawkins turned his tanned face, looked at his younger brother who was only 18 years old, and said affirmatively that shameless Spanish businessman has a wide network of contacts. If he is in Spain for a day, we can't do business. What's the point of doing business without profit? Speaking of this, John showed an angry expression on his face. Obviously, losing a way to make money made him very unhappy. However, "William, if this operation goes well, then," he said excitedly while biting his lip with his eyes shining, "then, our Hawkins family will return to the glory of our father's time, and even more prosperous prosperity," and his younger brother William was stunned. He hadn't seen his brother so excited for a long time. The last time was 3 or 5 years ago. Anyway, it was a long, long time. "William, I contacted 5 plantation owners in the West India region, and they promised me that as long as 1,000 healthy blacks are shipped, they will give us £5,000, which is the lowest price. And what will we give? Manpower? Ships." He saw that his younger brother was in a trance, and then he looked at the undulating sea and said to himself, "Compared with those profits, these are just minuscule, so what's the point of taking a little risk?" In the end, he turned towards the sea nervously and shouted loudly, as if he was announcing something, "As long as it goes well this time, we will continue to make profits and become the richest family in England. At that time, even His Majesty the King will know my name. I, John Hawkins, will become a household name in England!" Exclamation mark. Chapter 384 Navigator. John Hawkins faced the sea breeze briskly. His long flaxen hair was blown into a mess, but he didn't care at all. His face was full of satisfaction. The younger brother beside him looked at his elder brother in a daze. Seeing his crazy expression and language, William was silent. He couldn't figure out where his brother had such great confidence in this new trade route. "You know, in the whole of England, there are no people engaged in the slave trade, and they are the first people, John, that, if you catch those black people, will it reduce our favor before God? I don't want to go to hell after I die." Thinking of hell, William thought of all kinds of demons and tortures, and endless devils. Hearing his younger brother's words, John couldn't help becoming silent. To be honest, he was actually a little conflicted about these things. After all, what he was about to do was forbidden in God's Bible. "It's okay, my brother." John cheered himself up in his heart, and then comforted himself with a smile. "It's okay, it's a big deal. After you come back, donate half of the profits you get to the church. My Lord will definitely feel it. We are sincere." "We will definitely," John said, a little self-deception, repeating, "I hope so." William blinked, looked at the blue sea and the seagulls with wings, and sighed softly. John Hawkins' ship was a galleon, a Spanish galleon. Since Spain established its colonies in the Americas, it needs to carry a large number of goods and soldiers across the Atlantic Ocean. The main seagoing ships at that time, the houseboats and the caravels, are no longer up to such heavy tasks. The Spanish galleons, combines the advantages of these two types of ships, so it has a long-standing reputation. It generally has 4 masts. The front 2 masts are hung with railing sails, and the rear 2 masts are hung with triangular sails. The standard length is 46 meters 55 m. The displacement is 300 to 1,000 tons. There are several long decks, and the poop is very high. The large gale and aft deck has 7 floors, a displacement of 2,000 tons, a draft of 8 meters, and good endurance. It has been the largest seagoing ship in the world for a long time. For hundreds of years, galleon ships have been the best choice for the American colonies to transport gold and silver to Spain. They have left a huge reputation in the history of world shipping, and they are also called treasure ships. The ship under his feet was the largest Galenic ship in the fleet, reaching 120 tons. It was named Seymour, and it belonged to a light Hellenic ship. Next, the fleet began to head southeast, riding the wind and waves. Of course, brothers John and William, who had been blown by the wind for an hour, naturally returned to the cabin and took a rest. Although John Hawkins is the captain, he can only live in a room with a size of 5 square meters, a large bed, several tables, and some red wine and snacks. There is a bow on the wall, binoculars, and a swords, and matchlocks. On the desk is a thick Bible and the captain's sailing diary. As an ordinary clerk, William's room is naturally not as good as the captain's, so most of the time, he stays in his brother's room, reading books quietly and enjoying his peaceful time. Like his elder brother, William's love for the sea is derived from his genes, but unlike his elder brother who loves business, he likes his father, who likes reading and prefers to be in politics. Historically, these two brothers, one is the actual commander of the English Navy, and the other is the mayor of Plymouth. Both participated in the resistance against the Spanish Armada and made great contributions. Looking at the weather outside the window, the sun has already started to fall to the west, and the red afterglow is rendering the whole sky, and the sea below seems to be stained with a touch of color, which looks extraordinarily beautiful. William, come out, the boat is about to dock. Just as William was watching with relish, his brother's call suddenly came from his ear. Yes, right away. William clamped a leaf on the page he just read as a bookmark, then closed the book, and placed it carefully on the front corner of the desk. He ran swiftly to the deck, full of doubts in his heart. So soon, John, is it so soon? It's only a day. No, my brother, you are confused by reading. Hearing William's words, John couldn't help laughing, patted William on the shoulder, and continued, we have arrived in the Canary Islands and are preparing to stop the boat at the port of Tenerife. Speaking, John pointed to the ships docked ahead and the merchant ships lined up behind, and said William saw in a blink of an eye that there were merchant ships docked all around him, and there was an endless stream. The Canary Islands are the archipelago in front of Morocco and a stop in front of the Mediterranean Sea. There is an endless stream of merchant ships, and the Spaniards are soft on tax collection. In the 21st century, Spain still occupies this archipelago that originally belonged to Morocco. It is the main point of guarding the Mediterranean Sea after the loss of Gibraltar. Only Gibraltar. Why do we come here? Isn't it to catch black people? William was a little surprised. We came here to find an old buddy. John couldn't help sighing as he watched the people coming and going at the pier in front of him, bustling with people. Without this old man, how can we safely take the new route? How can we catch black people? Soon, while talking, the boat docked at the pier, and the two of them disembarked with a dozen sailors and boarded the pier. The rest of the ships are buying supplies, and the next voyage will take a long time. He is a Spaniard. He worked with a Spanish slave ship for a period of time. He is very familiar with that route. With him as a navigator, we will be safe. Then, a group of people went directly to the south, less than 2 miles away, full of hungry and cold children and poor people. All kinds of garbage filled the ditches, and the stench went straight to the sky. John Hawkins was used to this, and led the way ahead without changing his expression, turning left and turning around while walking. He said to his brother, he was injured in his arm and can no longer be a sailor, so he is currently living in a difficult situation. If we bring him income, we will definitely agree. Don't look down on him. Spain is much more familiar with the African coast than we are. With him leading the way, it must be much safer. After the introduction, they waited for others and arrived at their destination. William looked up and saw a simple shack built of wood and thatch. A man in his 30s was using one arm to decorate the roof of his house with thatch. Domingo, my friend, I have come to see you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385, Landing and Accident. Soon, under the offensive of a lot of money, Domingo happily agreed to John Hawkins' invitation to become their navigator. Next, under Domingo's guidance, the crowd bought a lot of candies and ironware, as well as a lot of ropes and slave catchers. Then, everyone set sail for their destination, the Gold Coast. The so-called Gold Coast is just that. After the opening of the new sea route, the Portuguese heard that Africa was rich in gold, but they did not know the exact location. As soon as they arrived in Africa, they searched everywhere for gold. Soon, they discovered that the coast of Ghana was rich in gold sand, and named it Mina, which means mineral. Later, it was called the Gold Coast, and countless wealth was looted from here to mainland Europe. As the first time to go to sea, John Hawkins chose the Gold Coast as the destination for the first slave capture at that time. Spain did not allow people from outside the country to enter the black slave trade. Therefore, it can be said that John Hawkins was the first person in England to eat crabs. Because of this, he invited Domingo to participate. As the navigator, only if he knows where the Spaniards often go can he avoid it. Well, the fleet composed of 3 ships made the passing ships dodge one after another. Often after seeing them, they would speed up and leave, for fear of provoking them. In this age of great voyages, merchants and pirates are one and the same, and being a merchant and robbing can be carried out at the same time. That's why the caravans that come and go are afraid of them. After all, the 3 Galen ships are also a big force. Hawkins and the others drove slowly along the coastline. The hidden reefs and wind and waves along the way made them terrified, and they dared not fall asleep at night, for fear that they would die if they were not careful. However, the scenery along the way opened their eyes. Mountains, deserts, rainforests, the same coast. The scenery is very different when passing through a tropical rainforest. I saw a grassland, a large number of cattle and sheep grazing with their heads down, and a river flowed into the sea. The navigator Domingo suddenly said to John Hawkins, "Your Excellency, Captain, let's dock. This is our destination, my friend." It seems that the destination has not been reached yet. There is still some distance from the Gold Coast. John Hawkins frowned and asked softly, "Yes, this place is indeed a little far from the Gold Coast. After all, there is relatively little or no gold here." As soon as the word gold came out, all the crew members immediately widened their eyes and opened their mouths, swallowing uncontrollably, staring blankly at the land ahead without saying a word. For Europeans, gold is the sun to touch in Latin. Gold means shining evening. It can be said that gold is the power, the engine, and the pursuit of gold in the age of great voyages, which made Europeans endure loneliness, disease, and storms at sea. Therefore, when they heard the word gold, everyone was not calm, including the 2 brothers John Hawkins and William Hawkins. Navigator Domingo glanced at the stunned faces of the crowd, calmly stroked his messy black beard, took a sip of the wine in his hand, hiccuped again, and said loudly, "We are here to catch black slaves, not to fish for gold. This is a place that the Spaniards disdain. After all, it is the best thing to catch black slaves and fish for gold at the same time." As soon as Domingo finished speaking, John Hawkins looked at the grassland full of cattle and sheep, and the river flowing into the sea, and immediately said decisively, "That's right here. We're here to catch black slaves, not for gold." He raised his head, looked at the obsessed look of the crowd, and quickly reprimanded, "Our people can't fight those Spaniards in Portugal. Instead of risking our lives to catch gold, we might as well catch black slaves. This is our purpose. Besides, it may not be true. There is a lot of gold in the black tribes we have conquered. We don't need to dig it ourselves, we can fish it ourselves." Seeing that his subordinate still seemed concerned, John Hawkins couldn't help talking big. "If the gold is looted, I will only have half of it, and the rest will be yours, I promise, and everyone's commission for going to sea this time will increase by 3 levels. As a superior, Sir John Hawkins naturally knew how to rouse the enthusiasm of his subordinates, so he quickly made an oath in the name of God. Sure enough, following his words, the enthusiasm of the sailors really rose. Their noses were steaming, and they looked at the gradually approaching grassland with fiery eyes. Soon, the 3 boats went upstream along the river bank, found a place to dock, and built a simple small dock. As a dock, there were a total of 120 people on the 3 ships. After leaving my brother William and 20 people to guard the ship, of course, including the navigator Domingo, hundreds of other people are gathering together, obeying John Hawkins' order, and preparing to act together. Among 100 or so people, more than 30 of them have matchlock guns, more than 20 longbowmen, and 50 spearmen. John Hawkins repeated his oath on the boat again, and then walked forward aggressively with everyone in high spirits. Hawkins was not familiar with everything in front of him. After the Spaniard said some attention, he refused to disembark. "Everyone follow me, don't run around." Hawkins said a warning, and stood in front, carefully watching the terrain. There is a river nearby, so the chances of people nearby are a bit higher, especially if there are herds of cattle and sheep. In this case, there must be black tribes nearby. It was the first time for everyone and they had no experience, so they all followed Hawkins very nervously, looking around. At this time, Hawkins suddenly stopped. He bent down, looked down carefully. "This is a human footprint. Black people around here?" "Yes, Captain, there are indeed black people ahead, and it's still a small tribe." At this time, a sailor behind him pointed forward and whispered. Hearing this, Hawkins looked up, and sure enough, he could see a tribe indistinctly, with vague figures, whose faces could not be seen clearly, like black lacquered sticks, thin and long. Everyone, get ready and start acting. Hawkins turned his head and ordered softly. Then leaned forward and slowly approached the group of black tribes. The people behind him also followed behind him sensibly, approaching the black tribe step by step. When they were about 100 feet, about 30 meters, away from the tribe, there was a sudden exclamation in everyone's ears, "Oh grave, oh acute, oh grave, oh acute, oh grave, oh acute." Hawkins looked up, and saw a 7 or 8-year-old black boy with his mouth wide open, with a surprised expression, and the voice came from his mouth. Chapter 386 Cannibal Tribe. The little boy was wearing a skirt made of sheepskin, his upper body was empty, his little feet were bare on the ground, and he didn't wear shoes. There is a string of teeth hanging around his neck, whether it is human or animal. It looks extremely scary. He held a spear in his right hand, and the spearhead was tied to a wooden stick with sharp stones. It looked like a lot of damage. Hawkins' heart seemed to be hit by a heavy hammer at this time, and his whole heart seemed to be broken. He was extremely surprised and shocked. The people behind him quickly raised the matchlock guns in their hands, ready to ignite, while the others also raised their long guns and drew their longbows, ready to shoot this little black man here at once, killing everyone. And Hawkins covered his fast-beating heart, waved his right hand, and stopped everyone's movements. He took a light step forward, with difficulty making a kind smile on his face, showing his few black and yellow teeth, and approached the boy cautiously. "Hello, I'm lost, where is this?" Hawkins asked softly. As for the boy's words, his eyes showed a confused look. He was very strange and curious about the strange and incomprehensible words that this strange, white-skinned weirdo said. "Gili Gwalalu, Lazizilu o." The little boy showed his white teeth, tilted his head, and asked curiously. Hawkins didn't understand the little boy's words, but he felt that the boy had no malice towards them. Seeing this, he rolled his eyes, took out a candy from his pocket, handed it to the little boy, and motioned for him. The little boy tilted his head, his eyes flicked between Hawkins and the candy in his hand, and Hawkins saw his hesitation. Seeing this, Hawkins put the candy directly into his mouth in front of him, and made an expression of enjoyment. The black boy's eyes lit up instantly, the corners of his mouth were split, and his white teeth dazzled. Seeing this, Hawkins patiently took out another candy from his pocket, handed it to the little boy, and beckoned him to eat it. The little boy didn't hesitate this time. He directly sent the candy to his mouth, and then his face burst into joy, nodding to him again and again. Just when Hawkins and the others thought they had bought him, the little boy suddenly called out behind him. Immediately, more than 100 black people appeared in front of Hawkins and the others, all of whom had spears in their hands, and their legs were slender and black, which was very scary. In this way, Hawkins' face froze for a moment, and when he was about to let everyone start attacking, the boy suddenly turned his head and muttered something to those long-legged black men, and the group of black men suddenly took down the weapons in their hands. At this time, an adult black man who seemed to be the boy's father had a dark face, more bones hanging around his neck, and a ring of colorful feathers hanging on his head. It seemed that his status was extraordinary. The black man with feathers on his head had a more serious expression. He looked at Hawkins and the others curiously, then turned around, murmured a few words to the black man behind him, and held a gesture of invitation to Hawkins and the others. Hawkins turned around and discussed with some of his subordinates. Then he boldly walked slowly behind the black man with feathers on his head. When the others saw that their boss was like this, they followed cautiously, looking around as they walked, never letting go of their caution. The other blacks surrounded them, their curious eyes kept shooting at them, and they talked from time to time. Their white teeth dazzled them. Hawkins and the others walked carefully for more than 10 minutes before they saw the original gathering place of the black tribe. Dozens of buildings that look like houses stand there. The roofs are conical and made of various long grasses and branches, while the walls are made of mud, which looks very simple. Black people are black people, indeed they are a bunch of savages. God will surely forgive me. God bless me. In this way, Hawkins felt much less guilty. Next, everyone in the tribe came out to welcome them, and all kinds of food were brought out and roasted with hot fire to the surprise of Hawkins and others. These food species include not only cattle and sheep, but also lions, pythons, and apes. Especially the 20-foot-long python scared Hawkins and the others. Next, the bonfire party began with everyone's welcome, and Hawkins chatted with each other following what the black chief chicken and duck said, using hands and feet together, and seemed to be very happy chatting. Food, wine brewed by blacks themselves, and black women became the biggest main course of the bonfire party. Some of the sailors who followed Hawkins couldn't stand their loneliness. Amid laughter and drinks, they entered the haystack together with the enthusiastic black people. The happy time is always fast, And at around 8 o'clock in the evening, the bonfire party is finally over. Hawkins and those who did not go to have fun, did not go to live in the haystack, but gathered together, guarded the campfire, and dozed off. Everyone get up, don't go to sleep. Around 12 o'clock in the middle of the night, in a daze, Hawkins asked about a scent, even tempting. It was the most fragrant smell he encountered in his life. It was the smell of food. Hawkins affirmed in his heart. He opened his eyes, swallowed his saliva, and looked around, looking for the scent. Not only him, but most of the people were attracted by the scent, got up, started to sniff non-stop, looking for the direction. What kind of smell is this? It smells so good. A skinny sailor sighed, squinting his eyes with a look of enjoyment. Boss, what is this? It's so fragrant, I've been seduced unconsciously. On the side, a bearded sailor swallowed and asked Hawkins, I don't know, let's go and have a look. These black people look pretty good, so we shouldn't blame us. Hawkins couldn't help swallowing, and said softly. As a result, other people who hadn't woken up, disturbed by the group of people who had woken up, got up one after another, rubbed their eyes, and searched for the source of the fragrance. Everyone searched carefully, and after walking for a while, they found the fire under a hill not far from the village. What made Hawkins and the others heartbroken was that the food was nothing but their dozen or so companions who were seduced by the black women. More than a dozen sailors had been cut into pieces by the group of blacks. Their heads were discarded on the ground. Their arms and thighs were tied to a wooden frame and roasted, exuding a fascinating fragrance. Seeing this, everyone started to vomit one after another. Their faces turned snow white, and they were trembling all over. Chapter 387. Burn these devils to death with fire. Beside the dozen or so grills, there were about 60 or 70 people gathered, men, women, young and old, looking longingly at the human legs on the grills. Almost drooling, the flames of the bonfire shone on their faces, making the greedy and ferocious expressions clear. Such a hell-like scene made Hawkins and the others tremble with horror. At this point, Hawkins realized that it was not his candy that moved the chief's child, but that the child wanted to capture them in one fell swoop to prevent anyone from escaping. They have changed from the original predators to the preyed. All this in the world is really amazing. Immediately, there was a person in the team screaming loudly, holding his head, and stumbling towards the unknown black distance. The whole person seemed to have gone crazy. Everyone didn't have time to react. They could only watch him leave gradually, bowing their heads in silence. Although everyone is a veteran of the sea and is used to seeing death and corpses, this is the first time they have seen a scene of cannibalism. Probably crazy. Seeing this, Hawkins frowned. He was so alarmed that the only plan for the present was to attack. Fortunately, they are all old buddies, and they know that weapons are always with them, and everyone has weapons. Avenge them. Let's go together. God bless us. Hawkins declared loudly, gritted his teeth, with a ruthless face. Immediately, he drew his dagger from his waist, held it tightly, and rushed forward. At this time, everyone suppressed the fear in their hearts, muttered God's blessing in their mouths, and rushed forward quickly. Although the distance was a bit far, these black people did not carry any weapons, and many of them even couldn't react and were still gnawing on their thighs. Hawkins ran over quickly, downhill, holding a dagger, and aimed at the blood-faced child in the front with a sword, piercing his blood vessels, and the blood spilled to the corner of his clothes. But he didn't care about it at all, relying on the breath in his heart, holding a sword, slaughtering wantonly. With a sword, without any thought of stopping, and the people behind him also used their own tone. The sound of ping-pong fighting and dancing sounded in Hawkins' ears. The hostility in his heart became stronger and stronger. His arms seemed to have endless strength. Waving, I don't know how long it took, until he could no longer see a black man in front of him. Hawkins stopped, lying directly in a pool of blood, panting heavily just like him, as well as the companions who followed him. They all lay panting in a pool of blood, regardless of the stumped limbs beside them. As the breathing gradually calmed down, everyone's ferocious faces also calmed down, but the haze in their hearts still lingered, firmly taking root in their hearts. Get up. Everyone has enough time to rest. Hawkins struggled to stand up, and now he only felt that his arms were so sore, as if they were not his own. But he still straightened his back and shouted loudly, everyone, get up and see how many people there are. Following his words, everyone who was lying on the ground stood up reluctantly, calling their names feebly. The sound of names made the fear in everyone's hearts gradually disappear, and it was safer to gather together. 79 people, what a heavy loss. The number of people dropped by 1/5, which made Hawkins very heartbroken. These are old sailors from his father's generation. They know the basics, and these old sailors are the foundation for the development of the Hawkins family on the swaying and treacherous sea. Let's go back and kill all the black people who eat people, leaving no one behind. Thinking of this number, Hawkins gritted his teeth and said bitterly, then turned to look at the tribe not far away, where there were dozens of black people. Okay, Captain. Go, kill those man-eating devils. Adhering to the will of God, let's go, everyone shouted and picked up their weapons, regardless of physical fatigue, and moved forward aggressively since it was the way home. Everyone's speed naturally increased a lot. In less than 10 minutes, everyone had already arrived at the tribe. A look of ferociousness suddenly appeared on the faces of everyone, and they raised their weapons, wanting to kill them again. Don't be impulsive, this time we have to outsmart. Hawkins stopped everyone's actions in time and said solemnly. He looked at the old sailors beside him. They were veterans who had followed their family for many years, and they couldn't be made to make huge sacrifices. He looked at the houses made of straw, and he had an idea, and said softly, we set fire to their houses with torches, and burned these demons from hell alive. Hawkins' eyes widened, and his face was as ferocious as a devil's. Next, since they didn't know how many houses were occupied, everyone threw torches to all the thatched huts one by one and set them on fire. Afterwards, the fire gradually rose, and thick smoke covered the entire area. Hawkins and others quickly covered their noses to prevent the smoke from choking their noses. Then, coughing sounds came from the thick smoke, and then black and white people ran out one by one, and men and women could not be seen clearly. Hawkins and the others killed one when they saw one coming out, regardless of men, women or children. As the night passed, the sun in the sky began to rise, and the blackness had begun to descend, but it was still a little cool. But beside everyone, there were more than 20 corpses lying motionless. Let's go. Let's go back to the boat and have breakfast. Hawkins waved his hand, feeling that there was no one in sight, so he couldn't help saying only then did everyone close their eyes. Their will was a little depressed, and they walked with heavy steps, under the sunshine of the morning sun, and headed home after returning to the ship to rest for a day and replacing a few injured sailors. Everyone cheered up and continued to set off in this place that the colonists had never visited. Hawkins and others spent more than a month capturing more than 1,500 black slaves. As for why there were more than 500 people, this is what the Spaniard Domingo said. Many black people must have died along the way. If we don't catch more, it won't be enough for consumption on the road. Hawkins looked at the overcrowded bottom warehouse. The place that could accommodate up to 50 people at most now accommodates 500 people. If it continues like this, many people will be squeezed to death if they are not considered sick. In this way, after experiencing some adventures, Hawkins and others finally embarked on a journey to the West Indies. There were a lot of gold coins waiting for them, waving at them, and he, John Hawkins, will be known throughout England on the first day of this week. The grades are trash, and the author can only cry silently. Chapter 388. After untold hardships, Hawkins finally led the entire fleet to the small Spanish island, Hispaniola Island. Another common name is Haiti and the Dominican Republic in the North American Caribbean islands. Of course, Little Spain Island is not its official name. It was named by the Spaniards, Santo Domingo. It's just that Hispaniola is bordered by Haiti to the west and the Dominican Republic to the east. Haiti was originally inhabited by the Arawak Indian tribe. When Hispaniola Island was discovered, there were about 1 million Indians living on the island, mainly Taino people, and a little Sivone lived in the northwest of the island. People at that time, there were already 5 native Indian regimes on the island. They lived in large densely populated villages, caught birds, fish, rodents, and cultivated the land. The Indians of Hispaniola used stone axes to cultivate and cultivated with wooden shovels. Their main food was cassava and sweet potatoes. In 1492, during the first voyage of the great navigator Columbus, because his flagship ran aground and could not bring the crew of the other 2 ships back to Spain, the Navidad Castle was established near today's Cap Haitien. When Columbus returned here in 1493, he found no one alive in the fort. He then established the Isabel colony on the north coast of Hispaniola, and colonization of the island began in 1502. Hispaniola officially became a Spanish colony, and the military resistance of the Indians on the island was crushed. In the 16th century, the Spaniards had established 15 cities on the island. In addition, Spanish officers and soldiers allotted the land on the island and turned the Indians living on these lands into slaves for mining gold, growing sugar cane and raising cattle. Due to the impact of smallpox, the Arawaks disappeared on the island in 1544, so the western part of Haiti Island was abandoned by the Spaniards. It became a stronghold for immigrants and fishermen from other countries, and also became a paradise for pirates and smugglers. The black slave trade has always been monopolized by the Spaniards, so Hawkins' pedestrians, in a sense, are smugglers. Therefore, He was in the early morning, around 5 o'clock, and there was a thin mist in the sky, making it difficult to see clearly. However, Hawkins still took his 3 boats and quietly parked on a simple pier. There were already several boats docked near the berth, but they were all small boats. Seeing these small boats, Hawkins frowned. Although he has enough personnel, these few boats are not a big or small trouble. Afterwards, the fog gradually dissipated, and the entire small pier was clearly presented in front of his eyes. 5 middle-aged men in clothes and leather shoes waited anxiously. They were followed by dozens of guards, who also followed their masters, looking anxious. After looking carefully, he knew the bald man in the middle. This was the plantation owner he had met last time through his relationship. He had introduced the other 4 plantation owners. His arrival was obviously also seen by the plantation owners, and their faces were overjoyed. "Oh, my dear Mr. Hawkins, I have waited so hard for you." As soon as John Hawkins got off the boat, the bald man greeted him and gave him a big hug. This made Hawkins, who is somewhat reserved and unique to the English, a little unaccustomed, but for the sake of gold coins, he had to endure it. "Hello, Mr. Francois, and gentlemen." Hawkins gave a gentleman's salute after leaving his arms, and then pointed to the 3 ships behind him and said, "The nigger you want has arrived." Immediately, Hawkins clapped his hands, and the sailors who had already prepared on the ship quickly escorted the naked black slaves down one by one. After walking at sea for more than a week, these people were locked in a narrow space, and their daily food was nothing more than some leftover and wormy bread of some sailors. All of them were so hungry that their bodies were weak, their eyes were dull, and they were a little bit floating when they walked. In order to prevent infectious diseases, Hawkins listened to Domingo's advice: let these black slaves be naked, and washed them with seawater several times vigorously, and then he was relieved. The black slaves were strung together with ropes and pulled off the ship by the sailors. Hawkins, on the other hand, communicated and chatted with these plantation owners. The guards brought by the plantation owners opened the mouths of the blacks from time to time, as if they were looking at livestock, to check their teeth, pat their arms and thighs, and check their physical condition. Some pinched the breasts of black women, looking serious, as if they were checking the production conditions of women. It was the first time for Hawkins to do this kind of black slave business. Seeing this from the corner of his eye, he felt a little uncomfortable for a while, and felt a little nervous. After all, treating humans as livestock is a bit of a challenge to the nerves. After getting used to it for a while, and thinking about the gold coins he was about to get, Hawkins felt much better. "Mr. Hawkins, you have a total of 1,116 black slaves. I want 200 males and 100 females. The male price is £5, the females are £3, and the children are £2. So here £1,300 is yours. I want 100. I want 300. After receiving feedback from their subordinates, the 5 plantation owners quickly bid and brought out boxes of gold coins. In this way, at this moment, more than 1,000 black slaves were sold out, and Hawkins made a profit of £3,800, which was his profit for this month. After making an appointment with these plantation owners, Hawkins sailed the empty ship to Santo Domingo, the central city of Little Spain Island. Since Spain and England had signed an agreement, the English were allowed to do business in Spain and the colonies. Therefore, Hawkins bought a lot of ginger, sugar, and tobacco with slave money, and prepared to bring them to England for sale. In this way, full of harvest, Hawkins and others returned to England. On the way home, the wind was smooth all the way, until they were more than 100 miles away from England, when a merchant ship suddenly appeared in front of them, flying the flag of Portugal. Hawkins quickly looked through the binoculars, and saw that the armed merchant ship had a heavy draft and was about 150 tons in size. "It's such a big fat ship. I didn't expect that it will make a lot of money when it's almost home." Hawkins' eyes widened, he wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth, and muttered softly, "Boss, let's do this vote. This will make us eat a lot of inflation." The first officer at the side came over, just like him, watching the merchant ship gradually accelerating ahead, swallowing his saliva, and kept saying, "Okay, it's done." Hawkins waved his fist and shouted excitedly, and then there were cheers on the boat. Chapter 389. Today is really boring. Colonel Charles lay on the deck boredly, opened his eyes slightly, looked at the clear blue sky, and muttered softly, "Are you talking about catching some pirates? There is a small pirate who doesn't even have a bird. Did you drive a few boats out to fish?" Charles jumped up suddenly, looked at the undulating sea, and shouted. There was an unspeakable depression inside. On the other hand, the sailors looked at their boss shouting like crazy, and were silent to each other. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." A white seagull spread its wings and screamed a few times, showing its presence, and directly hit Colonel Charles in the face. This made the brown-skinned Mr. Colonel turn red with anger. His eyes widened, watching the seagull gradually approaching him, biting his lips urgently. Everyone knows that his boss is already angry, and at this moment, the seagull dropped a white bomb with perfect precision about 10 feet above Charles's head. So, what appeared in front of everyone was this image: the bronze-skinned Colonel Charles, looking up at the sky, with a lump of white on his short flaxen hair, which looked smooth, soft and caring. Damn it, I'm so pissed off. I'm so pissed off. Colonel Charles was stunned for a moment, and then from his face to his neck, it became black and red. If you look carefully, you can still see faint green veins. Colonel Charles recklessly pulled out his saber from the ground, and slashed at the sky above him. I'm going to kill you. Kill you. You trash, trash, His Excellency. The colonel's words were heard in everyone's ears verbatim, and the expressions of the sailors changed suddenly. Although in name Colonel Charles scolded seagulls, everyone knew in their hearts that Mr. Colonel scolded Colonel James, the Baron who later became the commander of the English Channel Fleet. After the English Navy was established by Henry VIII, the Navy Bureau was established to preside over everything, including armaments, docks, and finances. Then, the Navy has 3 fleets. One is active in the Houghton Sea and the North Sea, with a base in Yarmouth. One controls the English Channel, with a base in Portsmouth. One establishes the Irish Sea, and controls the entire waters of the island of Ireland. Colonel Charles was only knighted, and he was only the commander of the Irish fleet. Compared with the crucial English Channel Fleet, the Irish fleet was incomparable under normal circumstances. The English Channel is the boss of the 3 major fleets, and commanding them is a due practice. But today, our majestic Irish fleet commander was asked by Colonel James to conduct patrols between Ireland and the English Channel to search for pirates. To this day, Charles still remembers the face of Colonel James at the moment they met. It was a smirk, hypocrisy, hypocrisy, and even a shameful expression, asking himself to go on patrol, and in his words, there was an appearance of being for England and His Majesty the King waving the saber in his hand. Colonel Charles became more and more angry, feeling like his lungs were about to explode. Kill you, hypocrite! Kill you, shameful person! Kill you! Hack you! Colonel Charles' voice became louder and louder, shouting and fighting without any scruples. Your Excellency, Commander! At this moment, Mr. Colonel, who was a little confused, suddenly heard a voice in his ear. He stopped gradually, shook his head, and faltered. The chief mate, who was shouting at the side, hurried over and helped Mr. Colonel, who was a little down, to barely stand up. What's the matter? Charles felt his head was a little dizzy, and his arms were numb. He opened his eyes, looked at the first officer who was supporting him, and asked, Your Excellency, it seems that there are a few merchant ships from our England in front of us, and they are being chased by a group of Portuguese merchant ships. What do you think should be done? The first officer frowned, glanced at Colonel Charles, hesitated for a while, and then spoke. What? I didn't expect that there are people who are not afraid of death and offend my territory. It's really Satan possessed, and the devil is alive. Colonel Charles pushed away the first mate who was helping him, squinted his eyes, looked at the black spots that were getting closer, and yelled loudly, Everyone, all in place, move forward to the left. As Colonel Charles yelled, the Henry VIII under his feet immediately started to move, and the 5 or 6 warships of 300 to 400 tons around heard the voice from the flagship, and also began to turn their rudders to the ship. Drive to the left, Your Excellency, Captain. Look, the front seems to be our Navy of England. Hawkins stared at the binoculars with a serious face, and looked at the 5 merchant ships chasing after him, regretting in his heart unexpectedly, after they robbed a merchant ship that seemed to be alone. Less than half an hour later, 5 merchant ships with a size of more than 100 tons appeared, as if their sons were dead, and they were facing them. There was a burst of shelling afterwards. Hawkins and others ran for their lives in a hurry. Their speed was almost to the limit, but the group of damned Portuguese were still chasing after them, and they looked like they would not give up if they failed to achieve their goals, which caused Hawkins a headache. What made him even more distressed was that his main ship Seymour was hit twice by a cannonball, and a large hole was broken in the ship's side and deck. What? England's fleet? Surprise immediately appeared on Hawkins' face, and he immediately turned his head to look over. Sure enough, 6 warships flying the flag of England sailed in front of him on the right, and he was saved. We are safe, safe, Hawkins said excitedly. Hurry up and let everyone know. If we go faster, we will be saved soon. As the notification was passed down, several ships ran faster, and the distance from the English Navy got closer, and the figures on board could be seen outflank the past and surround me with those Portuguese. Colonel Charles didn't even look at Hawkins and the others, and then commanded his fleet to surround 6 Portuguese merchant ships. Your Excellency, The other side is explaining that they are chasing pirates, and those 3 ships are all pirate ships. The sailor on the side suddenly came over and said to Charles, "Tell them, I didn't see it. I only saw 6 Portuguese pirate ships chasing 3 English merchant ships. As the English Navy, we have an obligation to fight pirates," Charles sneered, looking at the 6 Portuguese merchant ships with a relatively deep draft. All of them had green eyes. He is determined to eat this batch of fat sheep. After eating this wave, the food of their Irish fleet will definitely improve a lot, and they will still have a few gold coins in their pockets. Chapter 390. I want to go to sea too. Soon, the English Navy didn't explain anything, and started shelling in one go. The sound of rumbling, shelling was heard endlessly on the sea, and white smoke began to cover the sea and occupy the territory. In this regard, the Portuguese merchant ships had no choice but to fight back, but the English Navy used more hits than few, bullied the small with the big, and suppressed the number of artillery, which made the Portuguese miserable. In less than 10 minutes, 1 Portuguese merchant ship was destroyed, 2 were hit, and the other 2 saw that the situation was not good, and immediately prepared to flee the battlefield in fear. But the English Navy directly surrounded the entire sea, and the chance of escape was very small. Half an hour later, 4 Portuguese merchant ships hoisted the white flag and surrendered. Then Colonel Charles let out more breath of anger in his heart, and his whole body relaxed. "Send someone to take over the 4 pirate ships, get some wine, and celebrate." Charles watched the 4 Poles raise the white flag high, with a smile on his face, and ordered, "My lord, the owners of the 3 ships we rescued came to thank you." Suddenly, a sailor appeared beside him and said, "Oh, really? Let them come over." Colonel Charles agreed quickly. Afterwards, Hawkins boarded the battleship with a few people and a small box. As he walked, Hawkins looked around with longing eyes. This is a battleship, and this is the mount that a man should ride. Soon, Hawkins saw Colonel Charles with short flaxen hair and broad skin. "This is a knighthood conferred by our King of England himself, commander of the Irish fleet of the English Navy, the heroic and fearless Sir Charles." The adjutant on the side led them to Colonel Charles and introduced them in person. "Hello, Your Excellency." Hawkins bowed and said, "In salute, Your Excellency. This is the owner of the prestigious Hawkins family in the southwestern part of England, Mr. John Hawkins." "Oh?" Charles took a careful look at the man in his 20s after hearing his adjutant's introduction, and nodded. "The Hawkins family has an extremely famous reputation in the entire southwestern counties of England, and their wealth is also frightening. Even the previous generation of family heads once represented the city of Plymouth and attended Parliament. Moreover, the relationship between the entire Hawkins family on the seas of England is intricate, with contacts all over the southwestern counties, comparable to some nobles in the Irish Sea area under his jurisdiction. The Hawkins family is a topic that cannot be avoided. No wonder there is a representative of these 3 merchant ships, and they all belong to his family." Colonel Charles thought for a moment, then with a smile on his face, he said softly, "It turned out to be the head of the Hawkins family. Just now I wondered who these large merchant ships belong to." For Colonel Charles' compliment, Hawkins waved his hands again and again, and said modestly, "This is just a false name. Where is Your Excellency famous? Your reputation of bravely attacking the French Navy has spread all over England. It is an honor to meet Your Excellency today. Although the Hawkins family is very powerful, it is still not enough compared to Colonel Charles, who controls a fleet. This is a thank you gift for the rescue of you and the entire fleet, please." Afterwards, Hawkins took a step to the left, revealing the small box behind him. Hawkins nodded, and the box was opened, revealing golden gold coins. Many sailors showed demented expressions, addicted to it, and couldn't extricate themselves, and Charles narrowed his eyes suddenly. He didn't know what was on his face. Seeing this, Hawkins smiled in his heart and retreated quietly. Just as he was about to leave the deck, a voice suddenly came from behind Mr. Hawkins. "I don't know, do you accept old ships?" Hawkins' ears moved, and a faint smile appeared on his face, making it difficult to see clearly. A day later, Hawkins returned to the Hawkins family's stronghold, Plymouth Harbor, with 4 Portuguese merchant ships and 3 ships full of goods. "It is empty when you go out, and it is full of goods and gold coins when you come back." The ginger, sugar, animal skins, and other supplies purchased from Spain were quickly sold out by John Hawkins through the family channel. After all, these are fast-selling commodities in England, and they are very sought after by the English people. These goods brought John Hawkins an income of £500, plus £3,800 from the slave trade, and his income reached £4,300. This month's income is worth the profit of the previous 6 months. With the return of the sailors, The news that John Hawkins earned more than £4,000 a month by selling black slaves spread throughout the port of Plymouth. Immediately it spread throughout Devon, then to the southwest, and then slowly to the whole of England. In a tavern, it was full of drunkards and some caring people. King Dang, a middle-aged man with a rosy nose and a messy beard and hair, he slammed a large glass of beer on the wine table, took a sip, and then wiped his beard casually drinks on the table, and said aloud, "You don't know how disgusting those black people are. They cut off the heads of my buddies and ate the meat from their bodies. There was bright blood at the corners of their mouths, there were shreds of meat on their teeth, and their eyes were red." As his voice fell, the entire tavern fell silent, and everyone was listening to what he said, with their ears pricked up. I couldn't help it at the time, picked up my sword, and with a quick step, knocked down the black man who was eating his thigh, and then left and right, following his words. Everyone's emotions were completely driven in, with ups and downs. "Okay, that's all for today. I just happened to be thirsty," the sailor said softly, taking a sip of the wine in front of him. "Brown, tell me, did Mr. John really earn more than £4,000? At this time, in the crowd, a man with a bare upper body, with inexplicable emotions on his face, seemed a little excited and embarrassed. Others supported one after another, asking repeatedly and echoing, "Indeed, it's true." Brown nodded and said, "If I don't make any money, how can I have spare money to come here to drink with everyone?" Following Brown's confirmation, there was a sound of breathing in the entire tavern. Immediately, "It's too shocking, £4,000 a month, 12 months a year, so it's about £40,000. This is much easier than doing business, cost effective." Everyone sitting there was thinking inexplicably, and some of them walked around suddenly and went back to report to their masters. However, a thought suddenly rose in everyone's mind at this time. "I also want to go to sea to catch black slaves." Chapter 391 Scottish Nobility. The South Kenton district of London is the place where nobles and MPs buy the most residences in London, so it is also known as the Noble District. Unlike other places, the streets here are not only patrolled by the police at any time, but also patrolled by security guards recruited by these nobles. Therefore, although it looks open on the surface, it is still under closed management. It is also the only place in London that does not have a 100 household district or a 1000 household district, for here are no civilians to govern. To expect these to be governed by you, the London government doesn't have that much power. And just today, the entire South Kenton area, like boiling hot water, is very noisy at this time. All the Scottish nobles in London, as well as members of the Parliament, gathered together to welcome the arrival of the former regent, Earl of Allen. His Excellency the Earl has been in poor health since last year. Some time ago, when the other three families moved to London, the Hamilton family still did not leave because of the old Earl as a figure who has ruled Scotland for many years and is the head of the four major Scottish families. The Earl of Allen has a high prestige among the nobles and the Scottish folk, and he is considered the most well-known figure. So, after he got better for a while, the Hamilton family started to move, and today is the day when Earl Allen arrives. Today, all the Scottish nobles in London gathered in the newly built mansion, waiting for his arrival. Of course, following the arrival of Earl Allen, there are also the last wave of nobles who migrated, and there are about a dozen noble families so far. 70% of the nobles in Scotland have collectively settled in London and often live in England. Your Excellency, you have worked hard. With the help of the maid, the elderly Earl Allen dragged his sick body and got out of the carriage. Then, the Earl of Argyll, the Earl of Lennox, and the younger brother of Bishop David Beaton, the puppet patriarch, the Earl of Beaton, all rushed over to show their respect to him. "Don't bother everyone so much, I can walk by myself," Earl Allen said softly, waved his hand, and refused everyone's support. With the support of his son, he looked towards his new mansion. He looked at the new building with cloudy eyes, feeling very familiar and a little strange. "Why is this newly built mansion so familiar, Father?" "This is remade according to the appearance of my hometown, imitating the original." His son is about 30 years old, but he seems to be frightened by his father's majesty, and his words are a little shrunken. "HMPH, Earl Allen snorted softly, glared at him, and then walked into the mansion with brisk legs. The earls on the side looked at each other with doubts in their eyes. They couldn't understand why the old earl became like this. It was a happy event. After getting no answer, under the leadership of the three earls, all the nobles filed in one after another and entered the newly built mansion. Everyone sighed as they walked. It really deserves to be the head of the four major families. This mansion is exactly the same as the original one in Edinburgh, and the details are exactly the same. It is really rich and powerful. Everyone, come in. Earl Alan's eldest son shouted to the little nobles who were still lingering outside the living room door, not daring to enter. So these little nobles walked into the living room half rejoicing and half puzzled. It stands to reason that these small nobles are not qualified to enter the parlor. Only those higher-ranking nobles can go in and say a few words in a daze. All the nobles entered the reception hall, squeezing the originally spacious reception hall to the ground. When the little nobles looked up, the four major families had already sat down, looking at each other speechlessly. "Everyone, be quiet." Earl Alan's elderly voice suddenly sounded, and the entire hall fell silent. He frowned, glanced at everyone with cloudy eyes, and his silent momentum made people have to succumb and bow their heads. Then he closed his eyes and spoke softly. "Today was originally the day when I waited to settle in London. It was a happy day, but after I saw this newly built mansion, I couldn't be happier at all. This mansion is completely reproduced by my son according to the style of Edinburgh, and it is not bad at all. I am angry." After finishing speaking, he suddenly opened his eyelids, looked at the nobleman who was disapproved by everyone, and continued, "If it's not what I expected, the same is true for your houses, and the original style has been relocated. From this, I can know that everyone still regards London as Scotland and their territory, but..." The Earl's voice suddenly became louder. "Everyone hasn't completely changed their minds. This is the territory of the English, the territory of the young king who led troops to Scotland twice, not your Scotland." As soon as the King of England was mentioned, the figure of the howling, buried nobleman immediately appeared in front of the eyes of the nobles, and they all shuddered. So, before any catastrophe is caused, everyone should change their thinking, otherwise it will be too late to regret. Earl Alan's warning was like a slap in the face, which made the nobles wake up and nodded their thanks one by one. "Then, what about the house?" the Earl's son said softly. "Keep it as it is. I don't have so many gold coins, Your Excellency. Those northern barbarians have all moved here." The silver-haired butler looked at the Duke of Norfolk, who was still obsessed with painting, and reminded him softly, "I see." After waiting for a while, His Excellency the Duke said, "I've anticipated this a long time ago." His Excellency the Duke said softly while the pen in his hand didn't stop, "Our Majesty the King. He is afraid that the bucket of water in our London is too calm, and he is uneasy." "You mean, he is worried that we will unite," the silver-haired butler said with a bow. "It doesn't matter if it's the king, as long as he wears the crown. He will naturally have this thought, for the Scottish nobles to move over. The young king is happy to see the success, which is also one of his goals. Not the same as controlling England. The backbone of England's rule is the huge local gentlemen and nobles, and the power is scattered. As long as the king does not offend their collective interests, they will be allowed to be manipulated by the king. But Scotland is different. The nobles occupy the largest resources and population in Scotland, and other classes can only eat leftovers. The nobles concentrated Scotland's resources on themselves, so controlling the nobles was tantamount to controlling the whole of Scotland. Even if Edward controlled most of Scotland's rights after 2 expeditions to Scotland, as long as the nobles still refused to accept it, the treaties signed would be useless. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392: The Wedding of the Century. 8 years have passed since Mary, Queen of Scots, was invited to London, and the little Lolita has grown into a slim 14-year-old girl. The young His Majesty Edward has already been engaged to her, and what is going on now is just a wedding. Although the age of 14 is a bit young, according to the standard of 12 for females and 14 for males stipulated by the medieval church, it is quite ample. Not to mention, Edward's grandfather, Henry VIII's mother, gave birth to Henry VIII at the age of 13, although the consequences were a bit strong, that is, infertility. Looking at it now, this rule is regarded as early marriage today, but in that era of underdeveloped medical and healthcare, the survival rate of babies themselves was low, and many mothers died of dystocia. Accident-prone age. Therefore, it is not easy to become a real adult after the age of 18. Of course, Edward is not that cruel. To torture a 14-year-old girl, he must be at least 16. Some children of aristocratic families will be engaged before they are born, but when they actually get married, they have to grow up to the prescribed age. In Germanic law, there was an early prohibition of marriage between close relatives, as well as marriage with married women and marriage with children of other social classes. The church clearly stipulates that marriage within 4 generations, originally 7 generations, is prohibited in this regard. In order to maintain the purity of bloodlines and better protect the property, The nobles had to spend a lot of gold coins to bribe the church to get their approval later. The marriage of consanguineous relatives also became a legitimate reason for the church to approve the divorce of the couple. It was for this reason that King Louis VI of France divorced Eleanor, the mother of Europe. However, although England does not explicitly prohibit the marriage of close relatives, there is already awareness of this aspect in British traditional customs. Of course, in the eyes of the English, as long as they are not from the same family, they are not close relatives. All cousins and other close relatives are still popular, and let's sort out the relationship between Edward and Queen Mary to see if they are inbred. Queen Mary's grandmother, Princess Mary, is Henry VIII's younger sister and Edward's aunt, so Edward is Mary's cousin for it. When I didn't say it, go ahead. Maybe harmony. On December 8, 1555, it began to rain continuously in London early in the morning, but the streets of London were still full of people. Groups of guards in red and black jackets, with guns on their shoulders and daggers on their waists, raised their heads imposingly and looked ahead, blocking the eager and excited London crowd. Today marks the wedding of His Majesty King Edward VI of England to Her Majesty Mary Queen of Scots. All the citizens of London, as well as the Scots people who had travelled thousands of miles to London, all put on new clothes, preparing to welcome the carriage from the two kings with their own eyes. Not only that, businessmen from France, Spain, Germany and other European regions also came to witness this century wedding with their own eyes. It's not bad to say it's the wedding of the century. The wedding will see the union of the two kingdoms. Scotland and England will officially become the United Kingdom with the marriage of the two kings. Whitehall Palace. Queen Mary put on a white shirt, a white skirt, a white wreath on her head, and her long white gauze, holding a white bouquet, and her long hair fluttering. A light red makeup was applied on her face, which made her immature face look a little mature. The English people advocate white, which symbolizes the purity of love and good luck. The custom of wearing the veil can be traced back to the 10th century BC. At that time, it was prevalent in Mesopotamia for women to wear wedding dresses. After that, it developed into a white veil, and the size was extended day by day, and spread all over Europe. On the side, Queen Mary was wearing a long light green dress. Her face, which had been calm before, was now full of smiles. She kept looking at her daughter, and it was obvious that she was extremely happy. My daughter, my Mary, is married today, and you are the most beautiful bride in the world. Faced with her mother's praise, the naughty Mary couldn't help feeling a little shy, lowering her head, not daring to look into her mother's eyes. Haha. My Mary is shy. The Queen Mother made fun of her daughter softly, then looked at her and said seriously, Mary, from today onwards, you will become someone else's wife. You can't continue to be willful. Listening to her mother's earnest words, Mary disapproved, curled her lips, and said, Mom, don't worry, Edward won't scold me, and I've never been willful. In this regard, Queen Mary shook her head and stopped talking, just combing Mary's long red hair, with a touch of sadness in her eyes. From now on, Mary no longer belongs to me alone. Your Majesty, the time has come. The maid on the side, Casey, rubbed her sore eyes and said, okay, let's go. Then, Mary went downstairs to meet Edward. The young king is also wearing a dress and a crown today, looking extraordinarily heroic. After seeing Mary going downstairs, he took Mary's left hand, the two smiled at each other, and then boarded the carriage. The carriage is carried by 8 horses. Its appearance is black and gold. There are countless gilts and jewels on the surface. It looks extraordinarily luxurious. In front of the carriage, young guards rode tall horses and led the way ahead, while the guards on the side of the road also worked extremely hard to intercept the crowded crowd, and the scene was extremely lively on the road. From Whitehall Palace to Westminster Palace, a red carpet has been laid, and various flowers are sprinkled on the red carpet, and the carriage is driving slowly on it. Sitting in the carriage, through the thick curtains, Edward could still hear the cheers outside the carriage. Long live your Majesty! Long live the Queen! Long live the King! Long live! Listen, Mary, are all the citizens of London blessing us? Edward took Mary's left hand, which felt soft and smooth, as if there were no bones. He pointed his mouth at her ear and said softly, N. Mary felt Edward's hot air in her ears, twisted her neck unaccustomedly, let out a coquettish sound, and nodded. I will follow what I taught you later, don't be nervous. Edward looked at her white and tender jade neck, swallowed his saliva, and said softly, got it, Edward. Mary raised her head and said impatiently, I'm so smart, why would I be nervous? Just kidding. Immediately, the girl Mary stuck out her pink tongue and said in a delicate voice, it's not easy to get married. Chapter 393, The Wedding of the Century. Seeing the girl say these words, Edward knew that she was no longer nervous. Sitting in a carriage and feeling yourself surrounded by cheers is fascinating. Edward, can I open the curtains? Mary on the side was obviously intoxicated by the cheers, and asked with her little hand lightly touching the creation. Edward turned his head, looked at the girl's pure and curious eyes, shook his head slightly, and explained, there are all kinds of people on the road now, and they are all surrounded by the side of the road. If the curtains are opened, I think it will be dangerous. You mean, there are assassins? Mary blurted out, not being stupid. Yes, after all, the union of England and Scotland is something that many people cannot bear, Edward said, smiling. What you can't bear is exactly what I should do. Outside the carriage, a thin man with a white head stared closely at the slow-moving carriage, followed the voices of the crowd from time to time, and then yelled, never taking his eyes off. At this time, he suddenly felt that he had been hit. For the sake of planning, he suppressed his violent temper, and still stared at the carriage closely, looking for opportunities. Suddenly, he felt his neck being pressed against by a sharp point. He knew that as long as he moved casually, a big wound would appear on his neck immediately, and death was right in front of him. Shut up, don't try to resist, come with me. Just as he opened his mouth and was about to speak, a sentence came from behind him. In this regard, he could only follow the man's drag, slowly leave the position at this time, step back step by step, and then was tied up, with a ball of cloth stuffed in his mouth at the same time. Many people were suddenly caught and tied up in the crowd around the carriage or in the buildings beside the road. Time passed quickly, and the carriage stopped in front of Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey, which has been the venue for royal weddings for hundreds of years, is now the norm. In front of the church, the nobles of Scotland and England were all dressed in splendid attire, wearing their own identities. Each of them looked radiant and had smiles on their faces, but those noble ladies who followed were different. They have long hair fluttering and wear flower crowns, which represent chastity, and each dresses up beautifully, welcoming the festive moment in the best state. Of course, even the king's wedding has become a place where these ladies and ladies compete for splendor, attracting the attention of the nobles watching the ceremony. As His Majesty's carriage stopped, all the noble saluted male aristocrats bend over and caress their chests, while women lift their skirts and bend over. Everything is so orderly, Your Majesty, the nobles said in unison. After taking a look, Edward and Mary walked slowly into the cathedral, and just beside the altar, the aged Archbishop of Canterbury was watching the arrival of the king and his wife with a full face of relief. The wrinkles on his face were all crowded together. His Excellency the Archbishop, wearing a sash and a white cassock, presided over the mass for his marriage, and the cassocks worn by the clergy are exquisite, and white represents purity and cleanliness. Together with Mary, who was holding flowers, Edward came to the altar step by step, stepping on the smooth floor. From the corner of his eye, he saw senior officials and nobles with smiles on their faces. At this moment, Edward suddenly felt a little nervous. If nothing else happened, this was the only marriage in his life, and the first time always came so suddenly. His heart beat faster. Then, he turned his head and saw that the girl next to her was tense, her lips were pursed, and she was extremely nervous. Seeing this, Edward suddenly felt relaxed. A woman is about to entrust her life to you. At this moment, you can't be nervous. As for why the bride should hold white flowers, this is also an English tradition in England, because most people get married in June, because they take their annual bath in May. By June, the body smell was not bad enough, but because it was already smelly, the bride held a bouquet of flowers to cover it up. Followed. So far, Edward smiled and nodded to the Archbishop, who had been waiting for a long time, expressing his gratitude. Afterwards, Edward and Mary Kiki stood in front of him, lowered their heads, and were immediately covered with a layer of white gauze. If they had children, the children should also be covered with white gauze. In their ears, the sound of the Archbishop's voice, "This is Mass." At this moment, hundreds of higher-ranking noble officials stood silently in the audience, listening to His Excellency the Archbishop's Mass. Halfway through Mass, "It's time for the exchange of rings, Your Majesty the King. Are you willing to marry this beautiful girl? Whether you are poor or rich, you will never leave her." The old voice of the Archbishop of Canterbury rang in Edward's ear. Edward replied without hesitation, "Of course, I would, Your Majesty. Are you willing to marry this young man as your wife? Whether you are poor or rich, you will never leave him." "Of course, I am willing." Her Majesty the Queen didn't even think about it, and then gave Edward a shy look. Afterwards, His Excellency the Archbishop would bless the two of them in Latin and say, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I affirm the establishment of your marriage. Amen." After that, a servant brought up the ring that had already been prepared. Edward took off the ring in front of him and put it on Mary's ring finger, And Mary did the same. There is a saying that the ring is worn on the finger because the blood vessels on the finger led directly to the heart, which means that the hearts of the two parties agree to the marriage. After that, the two of Edward shared the same consecrated communion bread and drank the same consecrated wine, which means that they are one in Christ. Later, Edward accompanied Mary to the altar of the Virgin Mary, where Mary would pick up the hand-spun rod and spin the thread for a while, which is also a symbol of being a wife. After that, the two of Edward did not appear in the kissing scene on TV, which was not allowed in this ceremony. Afterwards, the two walked out of the church, and there were ladies who had been arranged a long time ago, carrying a basket of wheat grains dyed in various colors, blessing them. This is also a tradition. In 1491, King Henry VIII of England and his queen traveled to Bristol. During the journey, a baker's wife saw them, so she threw wheat grains to them from the window, and shouted, "Welcome to you, your majesty. I wish you happiness and long life." This became a good story, and by the 16th century, this custom had been widely spread. In the 21st century, it becomes confetti. These are just the main parts of the royal wedding. All in all, the king's wedding was extremely complicated, with many procedures, and each etiquette had its origin and tradition, and Edward was nothing more than a marionette at this time. Chapter 394 Establishment of the United Kingdom of Britain. Finally, Edward and the maiden Mary performed all the ceremonies, and they stood side by side, with hundreds of Scottish and English nobles, ministers, ambassadors to England, and religious figures of their own prominent prestige at this time. The young king and the young queen looked so well matched. They were a perfect match, a natural pair. This was the feeling from the bottom of everyone's heart. Everyone knows that Scotland and England have been enemies for hundreds of years, and at this moment, the Queen married England. So, at the same time, it is also announced that between Britain and the Soviet Union, England will be the main force, and the two countries will temporarily merge, but no one, except the English, wants the two to be a united kingdom. Spain, like Aragon and Castile, including the ambassadors of Spain and France, although they had faint smiles on their faces, they were already scolding their mothers in their hearts, cursing the couple to divorce as soon as possible. And the United Kingdom would be scattered in this regard. Edward is also very clear in his heart. Although he signed a treaty with the Scottish Parliament and formed the United Kingdom, all of this is based on his marriage with Mary. If the two divorce, the United Kingdom will naturally disband. Accordingly, wearing a crown on his head made Edward feel that his head was a bit heavy, and he didn't know what those kings thought. All kinds of gems were piled up desperately. If the body was weak, he would not be exhausted. Mary on the side also moved her neck slightly, and the crown on her head was also very heavy, which was the Scottish ancestral crown. The two stood beside the altar with solemn expressions, looking like they had something to say. The nobles and important ministers who were paying attention to this stood up one after another, and the ambassadors also pricked up their ears, not daring to let go of this important moment. Everyone. Edward glanced at him, his eyes were piercing, and his voice was clear and loud. Coupled with this special amplification effect built by Westminster Abbey, everyone could hear it clearly. Today is a joyous day. Under the watchful eye of our Lord, and under the witness of all of you, I, Edward VI, King of England and Ireland, Prince of Wales, King of France, will marry Mary I, Queen of Scots. When he said the word France, the French ambassador had a black face, and his expression was very unhappy, but Edward ignored him and said to himself, "And I hereby announce that Scotland will formally unite with England, Wales, and Ireland to form a united kingdom ruled by me and Queen Mary, and the name of this united kingdom will be called the Kingdom of Britain. I and Queen Mary's heirs will inherit this huge kingdom, and it will never disintegrate." As soon as Edward's voice fell, there was an uproar in the audience. There were endless discussions, excited laughter, angry roars, and unwilling sighs, forming a different kind of symphony under Edward's nose. What's more interesting is that the reaction of the group of Scottish nobles, even though the agreement had already been signed unannounced so far, still shocked them. As if their parents were dead, their faces turned pale, their lips were chapped, and their eyes godless, like a walking dead. And here, the smile on Spain's face has long since disappeared, and it has become a little gloomy and unified. The French ambassador on the other side had an impatient look on his face, an expression of disbelief, and opened his mouth wide in disbelief. "Excuse me, Your Majesty. Do you also agree with this matter in your heart?" The French ambassador suddenly saluted Queen Mary, then stared into her eyes, and asked loudly following the ambassador's speech. The English nobles and Scottish nobles next to him accused him one after another. For a while, there were endless voices accusing him of disrespecting the two kings. However, the ambassador was happy and unafraid, Staring at Queen Mary in a daze in this regard, Edward pressed his hand, took a deep look at the ambassador, and then stopped the noise. Then he looked at the girl beside him and smiled. The girl looked up at Edward, returned a sweet smile, and said to the French ambassador, "Mr. Ambassador, your behavior is very offensive, but I still answer your question." As soon as her voice came out, it attracted everyone's attention, but she was not afraid, and said loudly and clearly, "Of course, this is what I mean too. I have always agreed with the establishment of the Kingdom of Britain." Then Queen Mary's voice fell, and the entire auditorium was silent for an instant. This small opportunity, which could not be smaller, was wiped out, which shocked everyone. The next day, the proposal to establish the United Kingdom was passed by the House of Lords, and in the afternoon, the House of Commons also passed, and the Central Committee of England immediately announced that it would join the Kingdom of Britain on the third day. The Welsh local government passed the proposal and announced that it would join the United Kingdom on the fourth day. The controlled Irish Parliament passed a bill in Dublin, and the Irish Governor-General announced that Ireland would join the United Kingdom on the fifth day. The Scottish Parliament passed a proposal, announced by the current Lord Regent, the Earl of Argyll, to join the Kingdom of Britain in less than 5 days. A new British kingdom was born. A kingdom of about 320,000 square kilometers was born on the British Isles. So far, the British kingdom with a total population of about 4 million was born. Of course, on the sixth day, Calais. The Assembly of France announced that France had joined the United Kingdom. France, Royal Palace. Boom, there was a loud noise, and a piece of porcelain from the east, actually from Venice, was smashed to pieces by Henry II. "I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off." Henry II was so angry that he threw everything around him, including tables, chairs and benches, and everything he could see. The maids stood tremblingly by the side, lowered their heads, not daring to act rashly. "Damn barbarians from England, actually set up the United Kingdom, snatched away my son's princess, and announced that France would join the British kingdom. How shameless. What qualifications does he have to represent France? What qualifications?" Spain Royal Palace. Charles V sat on a chair, closed his eyes, and listened to his palace minister telling the story of what happened in London a while ago. While Prince Philip stood by when he heard that the Kingdom of Britain was established, he suddenly opened his eyes, which shocked the palace minister. "Your Majesty," said the palace minister tremblingly, "I didn't expect that this little king still has this ability. It really opened my eyes." "Yes, father, after the trip to London, I have already felt that this young king of England is more troublesome than his father, and his methods are good, and it's good that you know it. From now on, he will be dealt with by you. He can barely be regarded as an enemy, father." You? Chapter 395 United Kingdom Government Agencies. England, London. Have you heard? A passerby on the streets of London asked his friend who was walking alongside him what. The friend asked suspiciously about the United Kingdom. Said the traveler, "Of course, we will have a queen in England in the future. It's really strange." My friend exclaimed, "Nonsense. I mean, we and the Scots will be part of the same country in the future, and we won't fight anymore." The pedestrian said helplessly, "That's great. In this way, the war tax will definitely be reduced. It's a good thing." My friend cheered a little. "For ordinary people like them, this is the best thing." Ireland, Dublin. "Hey, I heard that we have joined a kingdom, and there are 2 more kings on our heads, and one of them is a queen," said one person. "Yeah, this is quite new." Another person sighed, "But what does it matter to us? Isn't life still the same?" "That's right, it's none of our business." The two smiled at each other and then separated. "Scotland, Parliament, you said, after joining the United Kingdom, what will our Parliament do? What will the government do?" A nobleman and member of Parliament asked worriedly. "How else can I raise it? Send your family emblem to the Heraldry Bureau in London, and then continue to be your own member." A fat member of the nobleman said indifferently, "What are you worried about? The 4 major families have all moved to England, and they will naturally work in England in the future. What are we little nobles worried about?" "That's right, the nobles are not in a hurry. Why should I be in a hurry?" He breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of this, his mood improved a lot in an instant. Edward naturally couldn't care less about the feelings of these people. "It's just a little bastard. No matter how much complaining is, it can't be eaten after the wedding." Edward didn't give the girl Mary something to eat. After all, she was too young and could easily hurt her roots. "Let's wait 2 years before talking about it." Afterwards, the young His Majesty the King frequently received nobles from England, Scotland, Wales and other places, and thanked them for coming all the way to attend his wedding. Then, He chose a few important nobles to chat with to enhance their relationship. The most important thing for him is to screen among the many nobles to see what kind of talented nobles they have, and let them join the government. Of course, the central government of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, in Edward's plan, has a central government and 4 local governments. The 4 major local areas, consisting of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, serve as the 4 pillars of the United Kingdom. The central government has taxation power, diplomatic power, religious power, minting power, and administrative power. The administrative power of the central government has the power to appoint and remove officials at the county level and above, and to exercise supervision. The central government sets up a cabinet, and the Prime Minister of the cabinet is generally held by the Speaker of the Privy Council of England, and has various ministers according to the usual practice. The Deputy Prime Minister is served by the Scottish Regent, who has no real power and can only be regarded as a spare tire under normal circumstances. The coalition government cannot intervene in the administration of the 4 major regions, except, of course, England. As we all know, England has already completed the centralization of power, while the other 3 regions have not. It is illegal to recklessly interfere with administration other than the right to appoint personnel. As for the legislative power, there is the Supreme Union Court outside the central government. The Supreme United Court is established to supervise and promulgate laws and regulations applicable to the entire United Kingdom. Of course, the Supreme United Court is selected from the top judges of the 4 major regions. The Supreme Courts of the 4 regions are appointed and dismissed by His Majesty the King. Supervise and impeach local officials. There are 9 Supreme Joint Judges, who will be appointed and dismissed by His Majesty the King. Then set up a joint council, with 400 members, evaluated according to the population. The population is large, and the proportion is large. Thus, England, with a population of 3 million, occupied 300 seats and led the entire joint parliament by convention. This post is held by the Speaker of the House of Lords in England and the Deputy Speaker by the Speaker of the Scottish Parliament. Of course, this is also a means for Edward to check and balance the central government of the United Kingdom. The House of Lords is dominated by nobles and religious figures, and is firmly in the hands of the King. If the President of the Privy Council of England and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are obedient, then the Speaker of the House of Lords and the Speaker of the Joint Parliament belong to him. And if he is disobedient, then the Speaker of the House of Lords and the Joint Parliament will not have his share, and the Joint Parliament will vigorously punish him, supervise and impeach him. The Scottish nobles opposed the allocation of seats in proportion to the population, and all of this was suppressed by Edward. Below the Joint Council are the 4 major councils: Parliament of England, Parliament of Scotland, Parliament of Wales, Parliament of Ireland. The Scottish Parliament is controlled by nobles. As long as the Scottish nobles are controlled, it is not easy. The Welsh and Irish parliaments don't have to think about it. Everything is under the King's control. The English Parliament is the top priority. At present, Edward has absolute control over the House of Lords and the House of Commons. In addition, Edward also established the United Kingdom's United Arms Bureau, set up 4 heraldic bureaus in the other 4 regions, and then set up a joint heraldic bureau. The local heraldry bureau records the local squires, gentlemen, knights, nobles and other classes, while the United Heraldry Bureau only records the nobles. That is to say, the United Heraldry Bureau only records the nobles with the title of baron and above, and ordinary people no longer consider it. In other words, as long as you register with the United Heraldry Bureau and record your family crest, title, and lineage, your aristocratic status will be recognized by the entire United Kingdom. In addition to the Bureau of Arms, Edward also spun off the mint. The 4 major regions are only allowed to produce and manufacture currency, while the highest mint is responsible for issuing and establishing currency. Moreover, Edward announced in the name of himself and Mary that the Central Bank of the United Kingdom would be established to oversee all financial industries in the United Kingdom. Of course, by convention, there are 4 tiers for the royal family, 3 tiers for the nobility, and 3 tiers for the central government of the United Kingdom. And the most important military power, Edward has been busy. Didn't the English Parliament not allow the King to have his own army? Then, Edward established a Royal Army and Royal Navy of the United Kingdom. In terms of the army, the United Kingdom Army Command Committee was established to lead and command all the armies of the United Kingdom, with the King as the Speaker. In terms of the Navy, the United Kingdom Naval Command Committee was established to lead and command all the Navy of the United Kingdom, with the King as the Speaker. In terms of military salaries, an Appropriation Committee is established, and half of the military expenditure is paid by the coalition government and the local government, which is uniformly handed over to the Appropriation Committee. The speakers of the regions, the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are appointed members, and the King serves as the Speaker. Chapter 396 Combined Mint. In this way, the army will be firmly in the hands of the king, and government departments can rely on the Appropriations Committee to supervise the army, thereby reducing the possibility of a military coup. This is what the young king learned from the Americans. It is because the Pentagon has received dual supervision from the Appropriations Committee under the Congress and the Ministry of Defense that there has been no possibility of mutiny with the exception of the Army and Navy. The Guards are not under the command of the Army Command Council, but directly under the whole of Crown Affairs. Thus, the central government of the United Kingdom was officially born on December 16. William Cecil officially took office as the Speaker of the Privy Council of England, replacing the previous Fairess Alexander on the same day. The Earl of Argyll formally replaced the Earl of Arran, who had been elderly before, as the Minister of State for Scotland. At the same time, Edward appointed Sir John, the former Minister of Royal Affairs, as Minister of State for Wales, to govern Wales on behalf of His Majesty Edward, who owns the Prince of Wales as for Scotland. On this day, Thomas Mayne officially assumed the post of Governor of Ireland. At the same time, there was the inauguration ceremony of the Speaker of the Irish Parliament. After that, the members of the Joint Parliament were also selected from the major parliaments, and the Joint Parliament was formally established the next day, December 17. He assumed the post of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and concurrently served as Speaker of the House of Lords and Speaker of the United Parliament. The Earl of Argyll, the Minister of State for Scotland, officially took up the post of Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and Deputy Speaker of the United Parliament. So far, the Supreme United Court has also proclaimed its establishment and promulgated the first law, which reads as follows. The Supreme United Court is the highest legislative body of the United Kingdom, and the laws promulgated are universal. In the United Kingdom, including territories, colonies, territories under its jurisdiction, and military occupation areas, all must abide by the laws promulgated by the Supreme United Court. The second article established a rule of the United Kingdom by Edward and Queen Mary, as well as the legal status of the direct heirs. In this way, the entire Kingdom of Britain was formally established. But for so many days, Edward has been receiving nobles and city representatives from all over the country non-stop. If he meets someone who looks pleasing to the eye and has good abilities, Edward will invite him to serve in the Central Committee of the United Kingdom. As a result, thousands of people were interviewed in the past 10 days, and only a few dozen people could be seen. Among them, there were only 5 truly talented nobles who had the potential to become cabinet ministers. Among them, 3 of Wales, 1 of Scotland, 1 of England, and none of Ireland were wiped out. These 5 people, Edward tested and determined that they still have some abilities, so they were appointed as local sheriffs one after another. As a result, the hearts of the nobles in the entire United Kingdom suddenly warmed up, and the appointment to see the king has been scheduled until next year. However, the nobles, who were still in a trance about the establishment of the United Kingdom, immediately settled down, started looking for relationships, and prepared to get an official position. And their resistance was greatly reduced in the second year, that is, 1556. On January 1st, Our Majesty the King did not go to meet those nobles, but came to the newly established United Kingdom Mint to see the production of new United Kingdom coins. As mentioned earlier, due to war expenses and too much foreign debt, Henry VIII greatly reduced the silver content in silver coins, coupled with a continuous shipment of silver from America to Europe, which caused the value of silver coins to plummet and caused England to inflate. Although this method allowed Henry VIII to survive, it made England mess up. First of all, silver coins, as the currency with the highest rate of folk use, including shillings and pence, are all made of silver, and the decline in the price of silver has directly led to the shrinking of the wealth in the hands of the common people. It used to be 1 penny per loaf, but now it has grown to 2 pennies, and prices have risen extremely fast. More importantly, the current silver coins are too common, and a large number of merchants forge them privately, which makes the silver coin market even more chaotic. However, metal currency has a natural defect, that is, it is easy to wear and tear. After years of passing a simple silver coin from hand to hand, the design and face value are almost blurred. The weight of the silver coin decreases, and the wealth it represents gradually loses value in people's minds. The inability of silver coins to hold their value for a long time prompted some people to prefer to melt new, unworn silver coins into silver bullion in exchange for more stable gold or even foreign currency. If it continues and is ignored, as commerce develops, the old currency will gradually lose its value due to wear and tear, and the new currency will be abandoned because it is not trusted. Under the influence of 2 reasons, the quantity of full-value currency in circulation is greatly reduced, which will cause deflation again. That is to say, Silver coins are worthless and no one uses them. And even foreign silver coins are used in the country, so the economy of the whole country will be in chaos. United Kingdom Royal Mint. Originally the brand of the Mint of England, it is officially the Mint of the United Kingdom. Under the dual leadership of the royal family and the coalition government, the Kingdom Mint is responsible for designing and planning the value and style of the entire kingdom's currency, planning the specific quantity of currency to be produced, and supervising the production of local mints. Sir George, who had been appointed Master, was promoted to Master of the United Kingdom Mint, and another was chosen by the English Mint. As soon as the king's carriage stopped, Sir George, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately greeted him and saluted respectfully. "Welcome, Your Majesty." And Edward snorted, and then glanced at this very old-looking place, which was slightly dilapidated, and obviously not in the current popular style. "It seems that the building here has been built for a long time, my sir. How is the new coinage?" Sir George carefully accompanied him, and when he heard His Majesty's question, he quickly said, "Your Majesty, due to the establishment of the United Kingdom, I ordered someone to build a new batch of templates that have already been made. Please check them out." Hearing that the kingdom currency had come out, Edward immediately became interested and quickened his pace under the guidance of Sir George. Edward came to a small room next to the big melting furnace. 3 coins of different sizes were placed on the table. Looking at their temperatures, it hadn't been too long since they were baked. Among them, the silver coin on the far left is off-white, about the size of a thumb cap, and it is a penny. The one in the middle is 2 or 3 circles larger than a penny, and a bit thicker. It is silvery white and looks like a silver coin. It is a shilling. The one on the far right is a gold coin, which is slightly larger than a shilling, but thinner than it, thicker than a penny, and is at the middle level. Silver and gold coins bear His and Queen Mary's portraits on both sides. Chapter 397. The Royal Navy. With a long way to go. From the point of view of appearance, the currency in front of you looks much better than the currency in the market. At a glance, you can tell that the quantity is sufficient and trustworthy. "Sir, what is the silver content of the silver coin, Your Majesty?" "It's about 50%. In the whole of Europe, it can be regarded as a silver coin with a relatively high silver content. The so-called silver coins and gold coins are not all forged with gold and silver, but will be added with appropriate other minerals to form alloys. For example, silver coins. If pure silver is used to forge silver coins, then the silver coins produced are very soft and cannot be circulated. However, if an appropriate amount of copper is added, the two will form an alloy, which will become hard and easy to circulate and use. Copper is cheaper than silver, so what the mint earns is the difference. Currently, what is the exchange rate between silver coins and gold coins circulating in the market?" Edward thought for a while, then turned his head and asked Sir George beside him, "Your Majesty, if it is as expected, 30 shillings will be exchanged for £1, said Sir George, blinking his eyes. 32 shillings, I remember it was more than 20 years ago. Edward muttered to himself. "Yes, Your Majesty," replied Sir George at once. "In this case, the newly minted gold and silver coins should be exchanged for 24 shillings for £1, and 12 pence for each shilling," asked Edward, looking up at Sir George. "Currency exchange ratios can't be changed however you want, and the cost issue must also be taken into account." "Yes, Your Majesty." Sir George bowed his head and made up his mind. If His Majesty's exchange ratio is followed, the originally estimated profit will be reduced by 2 layers, Your Majesty. If it is 1 to 24, then the mint's profit will be reduced by 2 levels. "Oh? Really? Then do as I say." Edward waved his hand indifferently and said, "It's just a little profit. Give it up." "Yes, Your Majesty." "How much is it?" "It's estimated to be around £100,000. "Oh." Edward was a little surprised. 2 layers of 100,000, estimated to be £500,000 a year. But when he looked back, there were more than 4 million people in the United Kingdom, and £50 was not much. By the way, the edges of the silver coins are cast into complex jagged shapes as anti-counterfeiting labels. Sir George is also a professional. When he heard this, he didn't know what His Majesty the King thought, but this craft is very difficult, Your Majesty. At present, the craftsmanship is not up to this level. Sir George was overjoyed at first, and then said with an aggrieved expression, "Do you still need me to teach you this? Look for it throughout the United Kingdom, look for it in Europe, and someone will definitely know it." Edward looked angrily at this dulcimer. "I heard that he came out of Oxford University, so why is he so stupid?" After speaking, Edward didn't want to continue to visit, so he got in the carriage and left. England. Portsmouth Harbour is the headquarters of the English Navy and the naval headquarters of the United Kingdom. It is very lively at this time due to the establishment of the Naval Command Committee. The former Minister of the Navy, His Excellency Vestinarnia became the Deputy Speaker of the Committee, including the Minister of Armed Forces, the Minister of the Wharf, the Minister of Finance, and the commanders of the three major fleets. Is a member of the Naval Command Council, directly under the leadership of His Majesty the King and former Lord of the Navy of course. The newly established Royal Navy has added the Ministry of Logistics, the Ministry of Personnel, and the Ministry of Supervision, weakening the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Armed Forces at present. The entire Naval Command Committee has reached 10 people everyone. These are the regulations promulgated by His Majesty the King, and the responsibilities of our Navy after the establishment of the United Kingdom. Everyone, go back and think about it carefully, and don't go beyond it in the slightest. His Excellency the Secretary of the Navy has a serious expression on his face, and his light yellow and slightly curly short hair makes him look so elegant, full of gentlemanly demeanor, and has no military spirit at all. Understood, Your Excellency. Everyone stood up, including the three new ministers, and said in unison although they all joined the Naval Committee. Lord Vestinarnia still presided over the daily affairs of the committee and still managed them okay. Let's go. Your Excellency said softly, and then walked out of the conference hall alone. The others congratulated the three newly established ministers. These three were only deputy ministers at first, but they suddenly became equal to them, which was really unexpected. Hey, Charles, I hear you've made a fortune recently. After the blessing, Colonel James came over and joked to the brown-skinned Colonel Charles HMPH. My Lord Baron, it's a great honor to receive your care all of a sudden. Colonel Charles looked at James' face and said strangely, just don't worry, our Irish fleet is doing well. After speaking, Charles turned around and prepared to leave. Seeing Charles speak in such a tone, such an attitude, James was impatient for a moment, and he quickly chased after him, facing him. By the way, my Colonel Charles, don't forget that you have received such a large gift, and I have a share of the credit. Seeing James' shameless face, Charles curled his lips, a little impatient. Thank you so much, my Lord Baron. Bypassing him, Charles turned and walked away. I will always remember your help, HMPH. Common people are common people, there is no manners at all. Just wait and see. James glanced at the back of Colonel Charles bitterly, said a harsh word, and then left. The entire Royal Navy currently has over 100 ships. Among them, there are only 3 large ships of more than 1,000 tons, and about 20 medium-sized ships of 200 to 1,000 tons. There are more than 70 small warships under 200 tons, accounting for most of the Navy. If you look at the rankings, the world's #1 Navy belongs to Spain, then Portugal, and then the United Kingdom. However, the strength of the Spanish Navy is still more than 10 times that of the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom is far away and out of reach. Even the Spanish Armada, which was famous in history, was just a treasure ship conscripted by Spain from the Americas. The main force in Spain has been fighting the chickens, stealing a lion, for the glory of Catholicism, but it was just the American merchant ships that made the whole of Britain tremble. Even if the defeat of the Spanish Armada does not mean that the British Navy has defeated Spain, instead, Spain can no longer and does not want to attack the British mainland. On the side, the British won the self-defense counterattack and proved themselves to Spain. If you want to destroy me, you have to break a few front teeth. The British Navy has a long way to go. Chapter 398: The Split Habsburg Dynasty. In addition to the special situation in the English Channel and the large-scale growth of the British Navy, the Ottoman Empire also assisted the United Kingdom. The contest between Spain representing Catholic countries and the Ottoman Turkish Empire representing Christianity is not only a matter of territory, but also a matter of faith. As we all know, the Mediterranean Sea is calm, and the Spanish galleon is like a tortoise in the Mediterranean Sea, moving slowly, which is a target. On the other hand, the Ottoman Empire used wooden paddle boats, which were fast and beat the Gallic boats to the ground. As a major maritime country, most of Spain is Gallic ships. It is impossible for Spain to give up the interests of the Americas and build all wooden or boats. Therefore, the Mediterranean is a meat grinder, and Spain continues to build wooden paddle boats to enter the Mediterranean to fight and let blood. It was because of the Ottoman Empire that Britain escaped. Thanks so much, chicken. Therefore, Edward's current strategy is to maintain a friendly relationship with Spain, maintain a hostile relationship with France, and maintain neutrality between the Western Turks. Let them fight. The Spanish market and the Ottoman Empire's market are very large, enough for England to develop vigorously. Speaking of Spain, Spain in 1555 can be described as a lot of events. On October 25, 1555, the Great Holy Roman Emperor, the co-lord of Spain, and the monarch of the Netherlands, His Majesty Charles V, suddenly announced on this day that he would renounce the throne of the Netherlands and pass him on to his son Prince Philip, and surprises followed on January 16, 1556. The Spanish throne was abdicated, and Prince Philip succeeded to the throne. Called Philip II on September 12, 1556, he announced his renunciation of the Holy Roman Emperor and passed it on to his younger brother Ferdinand. In other words, the huge Habsburg dynasty has been separated. Philip II, the son of Charles V, will lose the territory of the German region and the title of emperor, as well as the ancestral base of the Habsburg family. Austria. Charles V's younger brother, Ferdinand I, would receive the title of emperor and Austria from the original Hungarian kingdom. As another branch of the Habsburg family, it is hard to say which one is more authentic. Anyway, what makes Europeans happy is that the breathless Habsburg dynasty finally split. If you haven't come to Western Europe in the 16th century, you don't know the horrors of the Habsburg dynasty. The entire Western European region and the Iberian Peninsula are under the control of the Habsburg dynasty, and the Netherlands, including Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and northeastern France, is also the hereditary territory of the Habsburg family. Only by uniting the German princes can they barely resist the Habsburg dynasty in the German region. Italy controls most of it except France. Therefore, at this time, the people of Western Europe felt quite liberated, their pressure was greatly reduced, and their mood was relaxed. Spain. Extremadura. Today's Eustace Abbey is particularly lively. The priests of the abbey walked out of the door one by one, bent slightly, and saluted the couple in front of them with respectful expressions. His Majesty Philip II, wearing the king's uniform, brought his Queen Mary and a group of attendants to the Abbey of Eustace. Next to them was the old and skinny Abbot Garcia. While leading the way, he told the historical rumors of the abbey to the young king and queen beside him. Although the history of the monastery is nothing more than a series of clichés such as how to defeat the heretics and how to rescue the Lamb of the Lord, as devout Catholics, His Majesty the King and his wife still listen with gusto. Your Excellency Dean, I don't know the time, how is my father's condition? Philip II asked after hearing the Dean's story. Your Majesty, King Charles is currently depressed and unhappy, but under the blessing of our Lord and our prayers, his health has been brought under control. Dean Garcia immediately turned around and answered Philip II's question without any sense of self-esteem that a priest should have. Really? This is really great. Thank you, my lord, for your blessing. Princess Mary also smiled, said happily, and then prayed. In this case, then, I will donate 2 more villages as the monastery's support. Thank you, your Majesty. My lord will definitely see what you have done for him, and you will definitely receive my lord's favor. Amen. The head of the monastery was overjoyed when he heard that the monastery had added 2 more villages. The 2 round eyes were wide open, a smile appeared on the corner of the mouth, and then he responded in a muttering manner in this regard. Philip II and Queen Mary smiled at each other, and then continued to walk. Since his abdication, Charles V came to Eustace Abbey for self-cultivation. Usually, he is not only nervous, but also sluggish most of the time, with painful and swollen thighs most of the time. He devoted his energy to the Bible to comfort his heart. In fact, although Charles V was plagued by illness, he could still take care of state affairs, and most of the time it was normal. Yes, in 1555, a major event happened, which deeply hurt the fighting spirit of this devout Catholic, and made him think of retiring and came to the monastery. This incident happened thanks to a well-known figure among our high school students, Martin Luther. This figure set off a wave of religious reform and spread widely in the German area, and various Protestantism sprung up like mushrooms. This made Charles V, who had been building a Catholic empire, dissatisfied. He forcibly suppressed the Protestant princes and nobles in Germany. As a result, these Protestant states united and formed a Schmalkaldian alliance to rebel against the Catholic hegemony of Charles V. Charles V forced war with the Schmalkaldian League in the first phase of the war, 1546 to 1548. He defeated Johann Frederick, Elector of Saxony, and imprisoned, 1547 to 1552, Philip I, the generous Marquis of Hesse, who had surrendered. However, he won first and then lost after a new war broke out in 1552. Charles V suffered a series of defeats, and signed the Religious Peace Treaty of Augsburg with the princes in 1555, and the signing of the Augsburg Religious Contract is inseparable from one person, King Ferdinand of Hungary. In other words, this treaty was reconciled by Charles V's younger brother Ferdinand. As a result of this incident, Ferdinand's prestige rose sharply in the German region, while Charles V plummeted. Moreover, for the sake of the Habsburg family, Charles V was forced and had to give up the title of Emperor and Austria to his younger brother. More importantly, It is stipulated in the treaty that the German region has freedom of belief. This shattered Charles V's dream of a Catholic empire, and with it his ambitions. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399: The Seductive Title of Emperor. Of course, in Charles V's vision, although the Habsburg family is divided into two, his younger brother and son will definitely unite for the glory of the Habsburg family and deter the whole of Europe. That's right. Before the death of Charles V, his younger brother Ferdinand and his son Philip II would scruple his influence and his prestige, and united tightly to advance and retreat together. However, with his death, the Habsburg dynasty split immediately, and, it will surprise him even more, after his death, the Habsburg family was officially divided into two, the Spanish Habsburg family and the Austrian Habsburg family side by side. Moreover, the two also announced that the thrones of Austria and the Holy Roman Empire would be inherited by the descendants of Ferdinand, and the throne of Spain would be inherited by the descendants of Philip, and that the two sides no longer had the right to inherit the other party's throne. This is equivalent to saying that the two families have no connection other than having the same name. The Habsburg dynasty, which made the whole of Western Europe crawl under its feet, can no longer be reproduced. Father, are you in good health? Philip II stopped the guards from announcing, and he and Mary came to the room softly and slowly. At this time, His Majesty Charles V was bathing in the sun, watching. Starting with a thick Bible in his hand, he muttered words. After a while, Philip II bent down and greeted him softly. "Oh, it's Philip. Why don't you have time to see me? Sit down." Charles V opened his narrowed eyes, and said softly with a smile on the corner of his mouth, "Mary, sit down too. By the way, what's going on with your uncle?" The three sat together, and Charles V asked aloud, regardless of reading the Bible, "Uncle's place is going well." Philip II sneered, "How can it not go well, after you announced the transfer of the title of emperor to him?" The princes of Germany immediately voted happily. Uncle Ferdinand has officially become the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. There was no accident in the process. Charles V listened. He clearly felt his son's reluctance also. Although becoming an emperor does not increase the power much, how can the title of king be compared with that of emperor? Obviously a head shorter. The fact is exactly as I expected. My younger brother has already won the support of the German princes. Charles V glanced at his son's unwilling face and sighed. "So what if you are unwilling? If I forcibly pass on the title of emperor to you, the group of princes will definitely vote against it. In the end, the Habsburg family's influence in the German region will be reduced to a low point." Speaking of this, Charles V couldn't help showing resentment in his eyes. In the war between Catholicism and Protestantism, not only did he lose miserably, but he was almost captured, ruining his reputation. Remember, you have to fight side by side with your uncle, so that the continent of Europa, which is constantly at war, will always lie at the feet of the Habsburg family. Philip II listened to the latter words perfunctorily, dismissing the so-called unity, but it was difficult to say it in front of his father. However, Charles V did not notice his son's face, and he still talked about the greatness and unity of the Habsburg family. After that, Philip II and Mary chatted with Charles V for a while, and after talking about Catholicism, a common topic among the three, they left along the way. Philip II was still aggrieved that he could not get the title of emperor. Damn Ferdinand, he thought I didn't know that in the damned Augsburg religious peace treaty, he was leaning towards the group of heretics. Father was deceived, otherwise he would not have signed the peace treaty. Sitting in the carriage, Philip II's originally handsome face now looked ferocious and terrifying. Mary, who was sitting on the side, looked at her husband and listened carefully to his narration without saying a word. Although it has been done hundreds of times for the sake of the title of emperor in Austria, he actually abandoned his own beliefs, had a drink with those heretics, and stood together to weaken the interests of Spain. He is really a shameless person. When Philip II said that his lips were a little dry, Mary held a glass of water at the right time and said softly, "Okay, Philip, what's so great about a title of emperor? As long as you defeat the group of heretics in the Mediterranean, His Majesty the Pope will definitely not refuse you a title of emperor." Mary's words made Philip II feel enlightened. When he came to his senses, he quickly grabbed Mary's right hand and said excitedly, "Thank you, my Mary, for reminding me." Then, he said in a passionate and domineering tone, "I will definitely defeat those barbaric pagans, and let the glory of our Lord shine on the Mediterranean Sea." Constantinople, and the Holy City. Although Philip II was excited at the moment and made his wish too unrealistic, Mary still looked at her young husband with eyes full of admiration, and she was fascinated by it. As for why Philip II didn't want to regain the title of emperor, it was really Ferdinand I, whose title of emperor was too strong. Since 1276, the imperial crown has passed almost constantly between the King of Bohemia, mainly of the Luxembourg family, and the Austrian Grand Duke of the Habsburg family. The Hungarian king of the Habsburg family, his uncle Ferdinand I, received the imperial crown from the Emperor and Archduke Charles V of Austria. He not only served as the Archduke of Austria and the Austrian Habsburg family of the King of Bohemia, but also served as the King of Bohemia, as well as the branch Habsburg-Lorraine family. The two choices are combined into one. How can we compete for the emperor again? Therefore, he can only hope to defeat the Ottoman Empire and get the canonization of the Pope. United Kingdom of Great Britain, capital London, Hampton Palace. At this time, the young His Majesty the King was teaching his 3 one-year-old sons and daughters to play. The 3 small figures were running around on the grass with their buttocks twisted and smiling, teasing the dog from time to time, stepping on flowers. Nosely Dumas is out of bubbles. However, he is still concerned about the situation in the European continent, especially the movement of the overlord Spain. Your Majesty, Dark Blade has received news from Frankfurt that Ferdinand Habsburg has been officially recognized by the 7 electors as the new Holy Roman Emperor. Upon receiving this news, Edward suddenly had a vague impression that this is the main branch of the Habsburg family. The Holy Roman Empire is neither holy, nor is it Rome, nor is it an empire. Edward sneered softly in front of Guy, the leader of the Dark Blade. At the same time, Henry II of France started smashing things again, and the title of emperor was also his dream. Chapter 400. Heretics are worse than heretics. The so-called Holy Roman Empire, the full name, the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, or the Holy Roman Empire of the Germanic nation. It was a feudal monarchy empire spanning Western and Central Europe from 962 to 1806. Its territory included today's Germany, northeastern France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Austria, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. In 962 AD, Otto I, King of Germany, formerly the Kingdom of East Francia, was crowned Emperor of Rome by the Pope in Rome. Later Frederick I changed the name of the country to the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire located in Constantinople are collectively known as the 2 major empires, which are the only emperors. Later, the predecessor of Russia, Grand Duke Ivan III of Moscow, won the Eastern Roman Empire, that is, Sophia, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, as his wife, and introduced Byzantine court etiquette to Moscow. At the same time, he adopted the double-headed eagle of the Byzantine Empire as the national emblem of his country. That being the case, the supreme leader of Russia can no longer be called the Grand Duke, but should use the title of the 2 supreme rulers of Rome, Caesar. Therefore, the word Tsar, Russian, Tsar, was formed from the sound sand of Caesar in Slavic, which is the origin of Tsar. In this area of jurisprudence in Europe, other countries can only be called kings and grand dukes. Claiming to be emperor without authorization will be laughed at, or even attacked by groups. For most of the empire's history, it consisted of hundreds of smaller subordinate units, among them princes, duchies, counties, and free cities. In the early days, the empire was a feudal empire with actual power, but in the 14th century, it evolved into a confederate empire that recognized the emperor as the highest authority, and the emperor became a title. The Confederacy was invented by the Europeans. In the early days of the founding of the United States, it was such a confederate country. The elector is the prince of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, who has the right to elect the Holy Roman Emperor of Germany. The emperor was elected by them, so Edward dismissed this false Holy Roman Emperor who had no real rights on the surface. This was the case, but Guy at the side could still tell that His Majesty the King's tone was still full of sourness, very strong. Of course Edward was jealous. You know, this is the emperor. In the entire Western world, there is only one emperor, who is much more majestic than the so-called Indian Empire. Later Queen Victoria. When you meet other kings in the future, your status will be directly higher, which will make you angry and speechless. Of course, there was also a hint of joy in Edward's heart. The Habsburg dynasty is too terrifying. Although the 2 countries have become allies, if the allies are too strong, it will be scary. Reduce some strength, and the status between the 2 countries will be more equal. At this time, Philip II, who had just become the King of Spain, did a big thing, something unexpected and reasonable. He moved the former administrative center from the wealthy lowland King Netherlands to Spain. His father, Charles V, was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and his territories were everywhere. Therefore, he often issued orders from the Netherlands, Spain, Austria, or even a small territory. The relatively wealthy Netherlands became the administrative center, but when it came to Philip II, it didn't work. He lost the title of Austria and emperor, which means that the Netherlands is an enclave compared to Spain. The important thing is that, unlike Charles V, who was born in the Netherlands, he was born in Spain and spoke Spanish, but could not speak French and German in the Netherlands. The so-called money in the Netherlands gave no comfort to him. More importantly, the Netherlands is no longer what it used to be in the Netherlands. The tricksters here are getting more and more tricky. Many people have turned their backs on the Almighty Lord and turned into the arms of heresy. This made the devout Catholic king unbearable. Heretics are more hateful than heretics. Therefore, the relocation of the administrative center has become an inevitable trend. Madrid was his first choice, although he did not explicitly claim to move the capital to Madrid. Everyone knows that since the new king came to the throne, he has given orders from Madrid, and he brought his own court and lived in the Pardo Palace. More importantly, in a canyon outside Madrid, thousands of workers are non-stop starting to build a large palace for His Majesty the King. Standing in front of the palace under construction, Philip II watched quietly with his prime minister, queen, and other court ministers. Everyone, this is really a good place. His Majesty the King sighed with a fond expression. Yes, Your Majesty, this is indeed a good place. The whole of Spain is a good place. The new prime minister is Earl Aaron, a gentle and elegant middle-aged man. It was obvious that Earl Aaron meant something, and the faces of several ministers in the court were immediately moved, showing a little bit of anger. But Philip II pretended not to see it, and continued, yes, such a wonderful place is where we live. What do you think? Earl Allen, of course, this is where nobles like me should live. Earl Allen complimented immediately. What do you think, Mary? He asked about his queen. Indeed, Your Majesty, this place is indeed much better than the Netherlands. Queen Mary said happily, sniffing her nose lightly. Marie's mother was from Aragon, and she could speak and listen to Spanish, much better than the Netherlands, which is full of German and French. How can such a beautiful place allow inferior people to exist in this land? Never allow it. His Majesty's soft growl made the ministers beside him tremble with fear. Their legs trembled, and their hearts trembled. They knew that something important might happen today. Anyone with impure blood is absolutely not allowed to serve in the Church of the Kingdom of Castile, he shouted. The pagans of Germany and France are all of Jewish descent. The current Kingdom of Spain is the result of the merger of the Kingdom of Castile and the Kingdom of Aragon, and Philip II came from the Kingdom of Castile. Naturally, the old habit is still called the Kingdom of Castile. The name of the Kingdom of Spain today is the name of the Kingdom of Spain, after Queen Isabel II passed a constitutional monarchy bill in 1837, officially merging the two kingdoms into one country, and decided to use the Spanish word España, and with waves on it. The pronunciation of the pictophonetic symbol is similar to brew, which means hair in Phoenician, which has since ended the 300-year-old federal model. As soon as such ruthless words came out, the faces of the ministers were all different. There is a lot of information in this chapter, so I will popularize it for some students who don't know. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.